Hey guys, tonight we're time travelling to a place that looks like it came out of a cosy snow globe. But once you're inside, you realise it's more like a cold, soot-smeared survival challenge. Welcome to Victorian London, where winters aren't just cold, they're borderline apocalyptic. Streets freeze into treacherous glass. The air is so thick with fog and coal smoke that people wander off curbs into oncoming carriages, and even your breath seems to freeze mid-air like a reluctant ghost. If you were poor, and odds are you were, you probably didn't make it to spring. If you were rich, you just died slower but with better wallpaper. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps keep the stories flowing, especially when they're this frosty. And hey, drop your city and current time in the comments. I want to know who's listening and how cold or hot you are compared to this bone-deep freeze we're about to walk into. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin the night by stepping out of a cramped tenement house in Whitechapel, coat buttoned to your throat, scarf wrapped like a bandage. It's 6 a.m. and it's still pitch black, not because of the hour but because sunlight, like most good things, doesn't reach this part of London. The frost hits you first, not just the temperature but the texture. The very air feels like damp wool. Your boots crunch through snow mixed with manure, discarded cabbage leaves and soot. The kind of slush that looks like it might bite back. Your breath leaves your mouth in heavy bursts. It curls around your face and freezes in your eyebrows. There's a smell in the air too. It's not fresh or clean like crisp mountain winter. It's acrid, smoky, rotten. A mix of horse sweat, body odour and the choking sting of coal smoke pumped from hundreds of chimneys. Welcome to Victorian winter, where even the fog is filthy. But the real horror, the cold doesn't just attack your fingers or your cheeks, it gets inside you. It nestles in your chest, finds a seat in your bones, and refuses to leave. It's not the kind of cold you brush off. It's the kind of cold that sits down and tells you it's moving in for the season. It leans close and whispers that this year you might not make it to spring. People shuffle past you in silence. Faces are gaunt, eyes red-rimmed, gloves are fingerless or just scraps of fabric tied at the wrist. You pass a woman sitting on a doorstep cradling a bundle. Could be a child, could be all her worldly possessions. Either way, both are covered in frost, and no one really stops, because it's winter, and winter in Victorian London is a great excuse to keep walking, to mind your own business, to avoid eye contact and carry on. The brutal season gives people a kind of emotional frostbite too. The buildings rise like damp cliffs on either side of the street, rows of narrow brick townhouses blackened by years of coal soot. Icicles hang like knives from every overhang. You see one snap and fall, spearing the ground near a man's boot. He doesn't flinch, it's just another morning. Now here's a twist. For all its brutality, winter was also the cleanest time of year. That's saying something. The summer stench of unwashed bodies and raw sewage roasting in the sun was unbearable. But in winter the cold masked it. Death still came, of course, but at least it smelled less immediate. You pass a butcher shop with meat hanging stiff in the window. It's already half frozen. No refrigeration needed. Just nature doing its gruesome work. You peer through the frost-laced glass and see the butcher warming his hands over a tiny coal stove. He doesn't notice you. He's too focused on staying alive for one more hour. There's a man sweeping snow off the steps of a pub. Not for safety, just so people know it's open. He pauses to cough, deep and rattling. The kind of cough you hear too often this time of year. Could be the coal smoke, could be tuberculosis, could be both. And that's the thing. In winter, illness spreads like rumours. One sneeze in a workhouse could lead to 10 deaths. One shared blanket, one poorly ventilated room. Death lived in the corners of every building waiting. But here's a fringe detail for you. During especially cold winters, some folks claim they could hear the cold. No joke. They describe a kind of crackling in the air, or the sound of freezing fog whispering against windows. Victorian scientists, already obsessed with measuring everything, chalked it up to thermal contraction of iron and brick. But plenty of people thought it was supernatural, like the cold itself was alive. Which leads us into one of the era's great debates. Was London getting colder? There were real arguments in drawing rooms and newspapers about whether industrialisation was making the city chillier. Some said the endless smoke created a chimney lid that trapped cold air. Others argued it was just part of some natural cycle. Either way, it didn't help the fact that your toes were numb and your breath was freezing in your moustache. You duck into a bakery for a moment of relief. Not to buy anything, you can't afford that, but because it's warm. The ovens are going, and the scent of rising bread actually pushes back the cold. For about 20 seconds, you feel almost human. The baker doesn't notice you, or pretends not to. You're one of dozens who'll hover near his door until he shoos you off with a broom. It's an unspoken ritual. Outside again, you make your way past an alley where two boys are fighting over a broken umbrella. Not for the rain, for the fabric. They're trying to turn it into a makeshift wrap. One of them's missing a shoe. You look down and check yours again, still there. Small blessings. Your destination isn't glamorous. It's a factory, maybe a tailor's shop, maybe the docks. Doesn't really matter. It's a place where you'll sweat through frozen clothes and go home just as poor as you left, but colder. As the grey morning light begins to filter through the fog, you realise this is just the beginning. Winter in Victorian London isn't a season, it's a sentence. The fog creeps in sometime around midday, not that you ever really saw the sun to begin with. At first it just looks like smoke from chimneys, or maybe the mist off the river. But then it thickens. It crawls between buildings like a living thing, clinging to brick, soaking into your clothes. By mid-afternoon, it's swallowed the street whole. And this isn't some dreamy, picturesque mist you'd see in a painting. This is the kind of fog people name. Pea soup, they call it, and you can understand why. It's greenish, yellowish, thick enough to stir with a spoon. You stick out your hand and it disappears after the elbow. You've breathed fog before, sure, but this has texture. It has weight. It clogs your nostrils and settles in your throat like wet ash. You cough reflexively. Everyone does. It's a soundscape of rattling lungs and clearing throats, as if the entire city is struggling to breathe through a shared disease. And in a way, it is. The cause is simple, if you ask the scientists, those who are even bothering to study it. Thousands of chimneys burning soft coal, day and night. Soot, sulphur, unfiltered particles released into the low, damp London air. Then winter rolls in, and cold temperatures press it all downward like a lid on a boiling pot. Add in the natural fog from the Thames and the marshy ground, and boom! You've got yourself a smog stew. But that doesn't explain why it tastes so metallic, why it sticks to your tongue, or why your eyes sting the way they do right now as you blink into the void, unable to see more than a foot ahead. You shuffle along the curb, counting your steps and hoping you're not about to walk into a lamppost or, worse, into the road. Horse-drawn carriages loom out of the fog like nightmares on wheels. You hear the clip-clop before you see anything, and by then it's often too late. Some poor soul just got trampled down the street. You didn't see it, but you heard the screams, muffled and distant like shouting underwater. Then silence. The fog eats everything, even sound behaves differently. It bends and echoes. People nearby seem far away, and distant cries feel like they're right behind you. You feel watched, followed, haunted. Victorian fog plays tricks on the senses. You start imagining things. Everyone does. One guy swears he saw a headless dog. Another claims he saw his dead brother beckoning to him near the docks. Could be grief. Could be gin. Or maybe, just maybe, the fog really does open doors to places we shouldn't be peeking into. A fringe fact. The London fog was so iconic, so weirdly famous, that people overseas believed it was a natural feature of England, like Stonehenge or rain. Tourists would show up asking to see the real fog, disappointed when they got a clear day. Some even bottled the stuff as souvenirs. Imagine taking a jar of air that smells like burnt cabbage, death, and lung disease back home to your relatives. Wish you were here, choking on sulphur with us. Of course, fog this thick affects more than just your breathing. Work shuts down, schools close, river traffic halts, factories slow or stop entirely, not for the workers' sake, God forbid, but because people literally can't see the machines. Accidents spike. A fog like this might kill 100 people in a week, easy. And those are just the ones who fall off bridges or get run over. The true death toll hides in the lungs. Infections that might have been mild turn serious. Bronchitis becomes pneumonia. Children wheeze themselves to sleep and never wake up. Still, life stumbles on. Shops hang lanterns in the windows during the day. Street vendors light extra torches, not for warmth, but so people can find them. You pass a fishmonger hawking something that smells aggressively unfishy, probably rats. Who knows anymore? The fog dulls the senses. Even smell starts to give up. And then, from somewhere ahead, you hear something strange. Music. Faint. Wobbling. Out of tune. You follow the sound through the fog, your boots sloshing in slush. The source appears as a vague figure under a gas lamp. A blind fiddler. You recognise him. He plays here often, though you've never seen him in daylight. His fiddle screeches against the silence, a sad, sharp tune that vibrates in your chest like it's trying to shake something loose. He nods as you approach, but says nothing. You drop a halfpenny in the old mug at his feet and move on. His music fades into the fog behind you. Now here's something scholars still argue about. Was the fog truly worse in winter, or did it just feel that way? Some records show higher concentrations of pollutants during colder months, but others suggest it's psychological, that the gloom of short days and freezing nights made everything more terrifying. After all, the fog existed year-round, but in winter it felt personal. It felt like punishment. You try to remember how many people you know who've died during fog events like this. 3? 4? One of them was your neighbour, Mrs. Penfold, who got lost on her way home and froze to death 2 streets over, sitting on someone's stoop like she belonged there. They found her the next morning, stiff as a board, a dusting of snow on her bonnet. Another time, a baby was stolen in the fog, just gone. No sound, no witnesses, no footprints. Some say the mother sold it. Others whisper about the rat men of the sewers. Urban legends, of course. But when you live in a city this big and this broken, legends offer more answers than the police ever do. You take a wrong turn. You know because the buildings are unfamiliar and there's an odd smell in the air, like oil and mould and something faintly sweet. You pause. There's a shape nearby, tall, still. For a moment it doesn't move. Then it exhales. Just a man in a long coat, you think, but he doesn't respond when you greet him. Doesn't nod, doesn't blink. You back away, just in case. The fog isn't just bad air. It's a character, a presence. It makes the city feel alive and malicious. The way it slithers into homes through cracks. The way it softens the edges of buildings and people alike, turning everything into vague, ghost-like forms. It's not hard to see how Jack the Ripper stories took root here. In a world where you can barely see your own hand, the idea of a killer vanishing into the mist doesn't just seem plausible, it seems inevitable. You finally find your way back to a familiar street. The bakery's lantern is still burning, a tiny island of warmth in a sea of gloom. You can't feel your fingers, you can't stop coughing. You wonder, just briefly, what your lungs look like. Probably like the inside of a fireplace. And just as you start to believe the fog might never lift, the wind shifts. A sudden, sharp gust pushes through the alley like it's annoyed. The air clears a little. You catch a glimpse of blue-grey sky, the outline of buildings, the street stretching ahead. But the fog will be back. It always comes back. The Thames doesn't freeze over this year, not fully, but that doesn't mean it's any less disgusting. In fact, cold weather just adds new layers to the horror. You stand near the embankment, the wind slapping your face with damp chill, and peer down at the water. It's low tide, and the river looks like something that crawled out of a nightmare. Thick, dark and sluggish, like overcooked stew left to rot in a cauldron. The banks are caked with filth, sludge, animal bones, old boots, the occasional dead dog or something that could be a dog if you squint hard enough. It smells like old soup gone sour, like the kind of stink that seems to have a temperature of its own. You actually feel it in your nose, a wet, meaty heat that fights against the cold. The funny thing, it was worse in summer. That's when the great stink made Parliament flee their own chambers, clutching handkerchiefs soaked in vinegar to their faces. But winter doesn't banish the smell. It just repackages it. Now the reek rolls in as fog-tinged vapour, clinging to your clothes and hair, seeping into your skin like some invisible infection. And it's not just unpleasant, it's dangerous. Cholera doesn't care what season it is. Neither does typhoid. And all of it traces back to this festering river. You watch a barge glide slowly down the centre, its captain bundled up in so many layers he looks like a walking rag pile. The boat leaves behind a trail of swirling brown muck. You catch a whiff of coal smoke mixed with river rot, and it hits the back of your throat like a dare. A boy nearby, maybe 7 or 8, is poking through the shallows with a stick, hoping to turn up a scrap of iron or bone worth selling. He's wearing mismatched shoes and has frost around his ears. He doesn't even flinch when he slips ankle deep into the icy sludge. Water of death, your neighbour once called it. Satan's soup. You chuckled then. You're not laughing now. A fringe detail for you. Some Victorians believed the Thames had a kind of temperament, that it got angry or sick, like a person. When the water turned blacker than usual, they'd say the river was in a foul mood. Superstitious types thought it could sense the sins of the city and spit them back up, especially in winter when things were already grim. River dredgers and lightermen had their own rituals, tossing bread crusts or muttering prayers, just to stay safe near it. You turn away from the embankment and head east, toward the slums. There's no shortage of stories here about bodies found floating in the river come spring, preserved like pickles in the icy water. Suicides, most of them, a few murders, but some people just fell in. Fog, alcohol, icy walkways. It doesn't take much. You pass a public fountain that's been frozen solid. A thin icicle drips from its spout, catching the pale light like a tear. Water pumps are mostly useless now. Pipes freeze, and those that work churn out water so foul it might as well have come from the Thames anyway. Most people drink beer instead. It's safer, also warmer. Around the corner you stumble into a small group huddled around a barrel fire. It's not legal, but no one's enforcing anything today. Even the constables are probably indoors. A woman offers you a spot near the flames. Her coat is patched with wool and newspaper, her nose red and raw. She's got a baby in one arm, wrapped in what looks like a sack of flour stitched shut. The child's face is nearly purple with cold. "We boiled our water," she says to no one in particular. "Still got the fever." No one responds, no one needs to. The group talks about a man who fell in last night. Drunk. Disappeared into the river like he belonged to it. "Third this week," someone mutters. "Fourth, if you count the copper." And that's the thing about winter. It doesn't just kill people quietly in bed. It swallows them whole in public, in full view. It uses the fog as a curtain, the river as a trapdoor. People vanish. Not in dramatic ways, not with headlines or search parties. Just gone. There's a debate among scholars, one of those arguments that fill up journals and panel discussions, about whether London's wintertime mortality rate in the 1800s was a product of climate, poverty, or policy. Some say it was the fault of the poor laws, others blame the lack of infrastructure, or even the urban design itself. Streets that trapped fog, buildings that sucked out heat, sewage systems that were only half thought through. But standing here, warming your numb hands over a stolen fire, it feels less like an academic issue and more like a design flaw in the universe. You thank the woman for the fire and move on. She doesn't respond. She's watching the river. As you walk, you pass a narrow alley where two men are emptying slop buckets into a gutter, already half frozen with refuse. One of them slips and lands hard on his back. He doesn't get up for a while. His mate laughs, but it's the kind of laugh that sounds too close to crying. The muck splashes across your boots. You don't bother to wipe it off. You pause again at Blackfriars Bridge. The river looks calmer here, almost glassy. A frozen stretch of trash glistens on the surface. Bits of paper, straw, things that used to be food. You spot a hat floating near a piling. No one else seems to notice, or maybe they're just trying not to. And here's a wild little historical footnote. In some of the colder winters, amateur ice skaters took to the shallower edges of the Thames, daring each other to glide across puddles of half-frozen death. Some even pulled carts or built snowmen on the banks. Victorian optimism at its most dangerous. One account tells of a man who skated straight into a patch of open water and vanished. His body wasn't found until March. They say his face was frozen in mid-scream, like a macabre sculpture under the ice. You step back from the edge. A gust of wind cuts across the bridge, sharp, slicing. It hits the base of your spine and climbs up, unravelling your warmth thread by thread. Your coat isn't thick enough. No one's is. You try not to think about what's in the water, not just the dead, but the disease, the aftermath. This river feeds the city in ways most people don't understand. Its filth cycles back into food, into air, into everything. The fish from these waters end up in market stalls. The vapour from this rot ends up in your lungs. The circle is beautifully, horrifically complete. As night begins to fall, the fog returns. Thicker this time, colder. The Thames disappears behind a grey wall once more as if trying to hide itself. You turn up your collar and keep walking. The dead don't always make a scene in Victorian London. They don't need to. Most of the time they slip away quietly. During the night, in a workhouse bed, in an alley behind a butcher's shop. But winter changes the rhythm. It sharpens death's edges, makes it louder sometimes. You're walking down a narrow street in Spitalfields, boots crunching over a film of frozen grime, when you spot him, or at least what's left of him. A man in a top hat slumped sideways against the brick wall of a bakery that hasn't opened in days. You stop, so do two other people. One of them, a boy with a coal sack slung over his shoulder, steps closer, squints. "Dead," he says, like he's commenting on the weather. And he is. Dead, that is. Frozen stiff, hat still perched on his head, lips blue, eyes open but crusted with frost. No wound, no struggle. He just sat down and never stood back up. You look at the bakery window. There's a crust of bread on the other side of the glass. Probably what he was looking at when his body gave up. Someone pats the man's coat, checking for valuables. A quick scan of pockets, then a shake of the head. Nothing worth taking. Another person shrugs and walks off. You stay a moment longer, staring at the frost creeping up his collar. Death, when it comes like this, looks peaceful. But you know better. You know what the last few hours must have felt like. Numb hands, aching lungs, the slow drain of body heat like someone pulling a plug. And still, he wore a top hat. That's what gets you. The hat. This man had pride, or at least a sense of presentation. Maybe he used to be someone, or pretended to be. Winter doesn't care about your posture, though. It doesn't care about hats or titles, it drags everyone down eventually. And here's the strange, almost theatrical truth about the Victorian era. The dead didn't always get taken away right away. Sometimes, especially in freezing conditions, they stayed put. Sat slumped on doorsteps or in stairwells until someone got around to fetching the removal cart. If it snowed, they might get a light dusting like Christmas decorations. The city tried to keep up. God knows the corpse carts ran every day, but there were just too many, and too few people who cared. You start walking again, weaving through the streets where the snow has turned grey. It occurs to you that, in some parts of town, there are more bodies buried beneath the streets than walking above them. Cemeteries overflowed years ago. That's why they started stacking graves, or digging them extra deep. Still, in the worst winters, the ground froze solid, making burials nearly impossible, so the dead just waited, on slabs, in corners, wrapped in sheets or just left as they were. A fringe detail. In particularly cold seasons, families sometimes rented storage space for their dead. It was called corpse housing. Sounds ridiculous, but it was real. Imagine tucking your loved one into a rented spot until the thaw came, and while you waited, you went to work, you ate, you slept. Just another item on the long list of things you couldn't afford to be sentimental about. You pass a churchyard now, and through the iron bars you see gravestones leaning at odd angles like tired old men. There's a fresh mound with frost puffed up over it, like a duvet pulled gently over someone's chest. You try not to think about how many others didn't get that final kindness. No stone, no name. It's not just the poor, though. You remember that, even as you pass into a wealthier quarter. Not everyone who dies in the cold is a rag-clad beggar. The rich catch death, too. It just tends to dress better. In Belgravia last winter, a woman collapsed on her doorstep while waiting for her butler to unlock the door. By the time he found the key, she was dead, frozen to the tiles with her face tilted toward the sky. The newspapers reported it tastefully. Sudden misfortune due to inclement weather. But everyone knew the truth. Her dress was silk. Her gloves were fur-lined. Didn't matter. That's the problem with winter. It doesn't discriminate. But it does hide things well. People in the upper classes could die of pneumonia behind closed doors and still have obituaries full of Latin and dignity. Meanwhile, the poor stiffen in the streets. Their deaths aren't written about, they're collected. You spot another top hat. This one's on a man who's still breathing, for now. He's selling matches from a tin box, standing perfectly still like a statue to preserve warmth. He smiles when you pass, but his lips are cracked and bleeding, and one of his eyes is clouded with frostbite. He's got 4 matches left. You buy 2. Not because you need them, but because you don't want to see him still standing here tomorrow. Or worse, slumped like the man by the bakery. And that brings you to another open question. One scholars love to poke at with academic sticks. How much of this suffering was preventable? Could the city have done more? Could better housing, better hospitals, better heating have changed the fate of thousands? It's easy to say yes now, with hindsight, with modern heating and building codes and medicine. But back then, death was part of the system. A kind of release valve for the overcrowded, overworked and overlooked. You round a corner and find a cart being loaded. Not vegetables, not coal, bodies. 2 men in heavy coats and scarves are lifting a limp figure onto a wooden plank. There's no rush, no drama, just routine. They nod at you as you pass. You nod back. The cart rattles away, creaking over frozen cobblestones. A child runs after it for a few steps, calling out something. Maybe he recognised one of the bodies. Maybe he thought he did. As dusk settles, the city seems to exhale. Smoke rises from chimneys in uneven trails. Fog rolls back in like a returning tide, and the gas lamps flicker to life. You can't tell whether the air is getting warmer or if your body's just giving up the fight. Either way, you know what's ahead. More cold, more frost, more top hats on corpses. And somehow, life continues. Shops close, doors bolt. Rats scurry across alleys. People retreat into corners of warmth and shadow, hoping that tonight won't be the night their name gets added to the list. You tighten your scarf and keep walking. Just one more figure among thousands, lost in the long grey breath of a city that never really wakes up in winter. You reach home late, or what passes for home these days. It's a room, barely, tucked up 4 flights in a narrow building off Lehman Street. The stairs creak with age and damp, the kind of creak that sounds like it's warning you each time you step. The air in the stairwell is frigid, but not as sharp as outside. It's a still cold, a lingering, stagnant cold that presses in like a weight. You can already tell your room won't be any warmer. You push the door open, and the air hits your face like someone slapping you with a wet rag that's been kept in an icebox. There's a fire grate in the corner, but you haven't had coal in 2 days. Not since the last bit you found smouldering in the street gutter and scooped up with your cap like a lunatic. Coal costs money, and right now warmth is a luxury item, so you make do. You wrap your hands in a scarf, wear your coat indoors, and sit on the edge of your straw mattress, trying not to shiver hard enough to knock the walls down. The window rattles. Always rattles. You once tried stuffing the frame with newspaper to block the drafts, but now the paper's stiff with frost, curled like old leaves. You strike a match, one of the ones you bought from the man with the ruined eye. It flares with an almost holy glow. You cradle it near your face for a moment before lighting the stub of a candle. Its light fills the room with just enough visibility to remind you how grimy everything is. You're used to the dirt. What you can't get used to is the cold. That kind of damp, aching chill that climbs into your joints and settles like a lodger who won't pay rent. You can hear the tenants next door, a child coughing, a chair scraping the floor, someone swearing under their breath. You can smell boiled onions through the wall. Someone's lucky tonight. You think about going downstairs to scavenge a lump of coal from the ashes in the fireplace, but that means taking your boots off, and they've finally started to feel like part of your feet. Warmish. Removing them would be like peeling off skin. Coal. Let's talk about coal. It's the reason anything in this city works. It's how people cook, how they heat, how they make bricks and glass and iron and life. Coal soot blackens every building. It stains fingers, settles in lungs, sneaks into food. People die from coal in ways they don't even realise. Carbon monoxide, black lung, the slow erosion of their insides by inhaling invisible fire. But in winter, it's salvation. You remember the feeling of warming your hands by a coal fire. Not your fire, of course, someone else's. A workplace, maybe. Or a friend of a friend who let you stop by for tea once. That heat was like being loved. Deep, generous warmth that radiated out and hugged your bones. You never wanted to leave. But you did. Because you had to. Here's a curious historical tidbit. The cheapest coal, often used by the poor, was called nutty slack. Tiny fragments and dust. Hard to burn and full of sulphur. It stank like hell and smoked worse than wet wool. But it was cheap, and sometimes it was all you could get. People hoarded it, mixed it with anything flammable, sawdust, rubbish, animal fat, to stretch it out. Some even stole it from trains. Coal theft was a full-time job for some, dangerous too. Many died under wheels or froze hiding in rail yards waiting for their shot. You lay back on your cot and pull a blanket over your legs. The fabric's thin, rough and full of holes, but it's better than nothing. You try to breathe slowly, conserve warmth. You rub your hands together, blow into them, then tuck them under your arms. Your breath fogs the air. You're indoors, and you can see your breath. That's a particular kind of insult. Outside, a dog barks once, then goes silent. You hear a carriage go by, the wheels crunching over ice. Somewhere far off, a church bell rings. 6 chimes. Dusk settles into full night. There's an old man 2 floors below you who keeps a stove going year-round. Rumour is he has money. Not a lot, but enough. He's a retired cabman, lost a leg years ago. People sometimes press their backs to his wall just to feel the radiant heat seeping through. You've done it. Everyone has. It's the closest thing to stealing warmth you've ever known. It's not quite theft, more like borrowing body heat from a ghost. Here's a fringe thing no one talks about. People used to roast chestnuts using old shoe polish tins. They'd poke holes, set them on embers, and turn them like tiny ovens. That smell, burned polish and chestnut, became synonymous with winter for a lot of Londoners. A strange blend of bitter and sweet. You tried it once, nearly set your fingers on fire, but the chestnut was glorious. Like a bite of something that remembered what summer tasted like. There's a scholarly debate that might amuse you if you weren't freezing. Whether or not the rise of domestic coal fires made people too reliant on indoor heating, softening them to the point of fragility. Some argue that before the industrial age people were more resilient, built for the cold, that warming your whole house rather than just the hearth changed human tolerance. You're not sure what to think. You'd take softness right now if it came with a warm bed and enough cold to forget the ice creeping down your spine. A draft slips in under the door, you stuff a rag against it with your foot, but the cold finds other ways in. It always does. Through cracks in the floorboards, through the chimney flue, through your own breath as it leaves your body and seems to take some of your heat with it. You look at the candle, it's nearly out. The flame flickers like it's second-guessing its life choices. You wonder if you'll have to burn your last book tomorrow, just to get through the night. It's not a good book, some moralising pamphlet, but paper burns, and you can't afford principles. Then something extraordinary, a knock at the door. You freeze. Not from the cold this time. No one knocks here. No one visits. You rise, creak across the floor and crack the door open. It's the girl from the flat below. Red hair, freckles, older than she looks. She holds out something wrapped in cloth. Bread. Not much. A half loaf, already bitten. Too hard to eat, she says, but you can soak it. She vanishes before you can thank her. Just turns and disappears into the stairwell. You sit back down, bread in your lap, unsure what to do with this small act of humanity. You don't eat it. Not yet. Just hold it in your hands like it might warm you by association. Outside, the wind howls between buildings. Inside, you're still cold, still wrapped in your coat, still waiting for sleep like it's a delayed train. But for the first time tonight, you feel something close to comfort. The morning starts like it always does. Slow, grey, and louder than you want. You wake up to the sound of coughing. Not yours, though that comes later, but from the hallway, the stairs, the street below. Different coughs too. Rattling ones, sharp barks, deep wet gurgles that feel like they could lift someone's spine out through their mouth. The walls shake with it, as if the building itself is trying to hack up its misery. You lie still for a minute longer, wrapped in your threadbare coat, blanket tangled around your legs, face numb with cold. Eventually survival nudges you forward. You sit up, crack your back, and blink into the hazy morning light leaking through the soot-smeared window. It's pale and watery, and does absolutely nothing to warm the room. Your breath clouds the air in short puffs, and you realise, again, that you slept indoors and still feel like you're waking up in a snowdrift. You pull on your boots, miraculously dry, and stretch your arms until your fingers tingle. Your shoulders ache from the chill, and your joints feel years older than the calendar says. Your plan for the day: try not to die, and maybe find work. You head out, scarf wrapped tight, hat low. The street outside is busier now. People moving in clusters, shoulders hunched, eyes down. They all wear the same expression. Narrowed eyes, clenched jaws, focused determination to get wherever they're going without freezing, falling, or being hit by something, or someone. And of course, without being dragged back to the place they fear most, the workhouse. You've been in one before, not long, a few days, maybe a week. Long enough to understand what winter there felt like. It's not the cold that gets you first, it's the rules, the quiet, brutal efficiency. You line up for every meal, every chore, every cough. You're separated by gender, regardless of family. Mothers from sons, husbands from wives. And the food, if you can call it that, is hot but pointless. Broth mostly. A slice of bread maybe. A potato if you're lucky. Everything tastes like water with a secret. But that's not what stays with you. It's the silence, not the absence of noise. There's plenty of that. But a kind of silence that comes from giving up. People don't talk in the workhouse unless they have to. They sit still, wrapped in state-issued blankets that barely cover their knees, staring into space like they're waiting for a verdict. The fire in the main hall is always too small, too distant, and you don't get to sit close unless you're dying. That's the rule. Warmth is rationed based on proximity to death. You remember one man, a boy, really, no more than 17, came in with a fever. They sat him near the hearth. His skin was blue by then, but he still shivered like a leaf in the wind. The fire popped and hissed as if mocking him. He died 2 days later, quietly, without ceremony. They wrapped him in burlap and took him away. You left shortly after that. You'd rather freeze in the street than die warm and numbered. Workhouses were originally designed as deterrents. That's the genius of Victorian charity. Help, but not too much. Give, but only just enough to make survival feel like punishment. You're supposed to look at a workhouse and think, better do anything else than end up in there. It worked. For most people, it worked brilliantly. Now here's a strange but true bit. In the worst winters, some folks deliberately got arrested to avoid the workhouse. Jail, at least, came with regular meals, heat, and, you won't believe this, blankets. There are records of people stealing loaves of bread or standing outside police stations shouting obscenities just to be taken in. Cold makes you do strange things, makes you smart and desperate at the same time. Back on the street you walk toward the docks. Work might be found there, unloading cargo, sweeping walkways, carrying crates. It's miserable in any weather, but in winter it's a form of self-punishment. The wind off the river cuts through every layer. Your hands go numb in minutes, your boots soak through, and the ropes freeze stiff. Still, it pays. You pass a boy with a frostburned face holding a sign. Work for 2p. Shovel snow. His shovel is more rust than metal. You nod to him, but don't take the offer. You don't have snow to shovel. Not today. You glance up at the sky. The clouds hang low and bruised, like the city has taken a beating. Snow could fall again any minute, and the wind already smells like ice and coal. A bad combination. You pull your scarf tighter and press on. Here's something scholars debate, and always will. Were the workhouses cruel by design, or just the product of a cold, clumsy system? Some argue the architects of the poor laws truly believed they were helping, that by making assistance unpleasant they encouraged self-reliance. Others say it was cruelty, pure and calculated, an economy of suffering. You can't say which side is right, but you know how it feels, and that speaks louder than any academic theory. At the docks, you join a small crowd huddled near the foreman's shack. He comes out eventually, gloved and scowling, eyes scanning the group like he's shopping for meat. He points. 1, 2, 3. Not you. You don't argue. There's no point. You walk away, hands jammed deep in your pockets, heart beating slow and heavy. On the way back, you spot a workhouse wagon. A covered cart, black with iron trim, like a coffin on wheels. Inside, men and women huddle together, wrapped in rags, eyes hollow. They're being transferred from one house to another like inventory. The driver flicks the reins and the horses grunt forward. One woman inside coughs violently, blood splattering the wooden wall beside her. No one reacts. You don't look away. You want to remember her, her cough, her blood. You want to remember what happens to people when winter decides it doesn't like them. The sun, such as it is, begins to dip low behind the skyline. Gas lamps flicker awake. The shadows stretch long across the street. You think about the workhouse again, the fire you'll never sit near, the boy with the fever, the silence. You think about the others still inside, wrapped in itchy blankets, waiting for something to change. You pass the girl who gave you bread. She's standing by her doorway, staring into the street like she's watching for signs of the next storm. You raise a hand. She nods once, doesn't smile. You're home again now, climbing those stairs, peeling off your gloves, rubbing your hands until they sting. You strike another match. The candle sputters to life. You sit near it, letting the light pretend to be warmth. The wind outside howls like it's laughing, or crying, Or both. You pull the blanket up and brace for another night. You wake up coughing, hard. The kind of cough that starts deep in your ribs and rattles all the way through your skull. It shakes the frost from your eyelashes and stirs the rats in the walls. You sit up slowly, throat raw, chest sore, and exhale a plume of white breath. The candle burned out in the night. Again, its wax curled across the plate like a dead flower. The bread from the night before is gone. You vaguely remember eating it half asleep, chewing slowly to keep your jaw warm. The taste was nothing. The memory is barely there. Just salt, cold, and a kind of dry resignation. Outside, the city groans back to life. Hooves clatter over cobblestones slick with ice, and someone's already shouting about milk, or the lack of it. You hear a bell ringing from somewhere distant. Maybe a chapel, maybe a dustman's cart. You don't care. You're already pulling on your boots, shrugging into your coat and heading out into the frostbite once again. Today you've got something different lined up, something worse if that's possible. Chimney sweeping. You're not officially hired, of course. Not on the books. No one writes your name down. You're filling in for a boy who broke his arm slipping on a rooftop 2 days ago. You don't ask what happened to him after. You already know. The man you meet near the job site is thick-necked and red-eyed, smelling of gin and soot. "You'll fit," he says, sizing you up like a tailor measuring for a coffin. You're not as small as you used to be, but you're still narrow enough to squeeze through chimneys if you can talk just right. You've done this before. Once. You swore you wouldn't again. And yet, here you are. The first house is 2 stories. Middle class. Not fancy, but clean. A maid lets you in through the back, and you trail after the sweep as he leads you to the sitting room where the hearth gapes like a black mouth. The fire's out, but it's still warm near the bricks. The man hands you a brush and nods toward the opening. Up you go! You crouch, kneel, then inch your way into the flue. Your coat stays behind. You need to be as slim as possible. Just your shirt, your scarf, your courage. The inside of the chimney is cold and close, and smells of old smoke and animal fat and mildew. Soot cakes the walls in thick, greasy layers. It gets under your nails, into your teeth. You press your back against one side and your knees against the other, inching upward like a beetle. After a few feet, the light disappears. Everything becomes shadow and scrape and breath. The soot rains down as you move, fine and gritty. It coats your throat, your eyelids. Your nose starts to run, and then it clogs completely. You stop for a moment, gasping in the darkness, and remember the boy who broke his arm. Probably slipped on a slate, or maybe passed out in a chimney just like this one. Fringe fact, some sweeps used to light small fires underneath the chimney to encourage stuck children to move faster. Called it the devil's brush. And if the boy didn't make it out in time, well, there was always another orphan. You reach the bend and twist your body awkwardly, using the stiff brush to dislodge soot clumps. Some come down in great puffs, making your eyes sting. Your hands scrape raw against the bricks, and your knees throb. The brush gets stuck, you yank it harder, too hard. It pops free and you nearly lose your balance. You brace yourself, panting, your face black with sweat and ash. In this moment you feel the full weight of the work. Not just the physical pain, but the absurdity of it. The humiliation, the desperation. You're crawling through the arteries of someone else's house, cleaning the poison they create just so you can eat. You are, quite literally, choking on someone else's comfort. You finally reach the top, poke the brush above the flue and catch a breath of open air. The sky is pale. The wind bites. Below, the sweep yells something. You can't make out the words. Doesn't matter. Time to go back down. You shimmy back the way you came, each movement slower now. Your arms are rubber. Your lungs burn. When you finally tumble out of the hearth, the sweep barely looks at you. Just takes the brush and hands you a rag. Next house, he mutters. Hurry up. You wipe your face as best you can, but the soot's in your skin now. In your hair, your nose, your ears. It'll take days to come out. Maybe it never will. The next house is worse. 3 stories. Narrow chimney. You hesitate. Too old for this, the sweep grumbles, eyeing you again. But you'll fit. Don't get stuck. As if that's up to you. You do it again. Crawl in, climb, scrub, cough. This time, you taste blood when you cough, and your vision swims for a moment near the top. You close your eyes, press your forehead to the wall, and count to 10, then 20, then you keep going. There's a historical debate still alive today about how many chimney sweeps died each winter. Records are sketchy. Most weren't counted. Children vanished and no one reported it. Some estimate dozens per season, others say hundreds. A few argue the death toll was exaggerated, pushed by reformers with political agendas, but none of them crawled inside one of these chimneys. None of them swallowed soot. By the time you finish the third house, you can barely stand. Your hands shake, your teeth chatter. The sweep tosses you a few coins, far less than promised. "You'll live," he says, almost like a challenge. Then he walks off, brush over his shoulder. You stand there, blackened, broken, holding coins that feel like gravel. You don't even bother wiping your face. You just walk through alleys, past butcher shops, through clouds of fog and smells of sewage and fire and steam. You pass a group of boys kicking a frozen lump that might have once been a cabbage. They laugh like they don't know what cold is yet. You envy them. Back home, you peel off your shirt and black dust falls in clouds. Your skin is raw in patches. You cough again, and this time more blood. Just a little. You stare at it on your palm, then wipe it on your trouser leg. Nothing to be done. You light the last match. The candle flickers weakly. You lie back, arms across your chest, eyes wide open. There's soot in your eyelashes. The girl downstairs is singing softly. A lullaby, maybe, or something close. You fall asleep thinking about chimneys, thinking about climbing up and never coming down. Morning creeps in like a burglar, not a sunrise. The light is a pale grey smear over the window, the kind that makes you wonder if it's dawn or just another hour of endless winter. You sit up coughing, still tasting soot from yesterday's chimneys. Your muscles ache from all the climbing and crawling. The inside of your throat feels like sandpaper. You spit black phlegm into a rag and toss it aside. Another day, another lungful of Victorian air. Today isn't for work, though, not officially. Today you've been roped into something else entirely. A woman down the street, Mrs. Holloway, has a job for you. You're not sure what it is, only that it involves her nieces and some kind of outing. Against your better judgment, you said yes. Coin is coin. You shuffle out into the street, scarf high over your nose. The frost has come back overnight, laying a thin, sparkling crust over every cobblestone and window ledge. It's pretty in that lethal way a knife can be pretty. People are slipping everywhere, clutching rails, arms out for balance. A cart horse goes down hard on the ice, hooves scrabbling. Its driver curses and pulls, and the sound echoes down the street like a gunshot. Mrs. Holloway's place is better than yours. A whole townhouse, narrow but tall, painted white once upon a time before the soot turned it a melancholy grey. She lets you in through the side door. Her kitchen smells faintly of coal smoke and lavender soap, a rare attempt at masking winter odours. The two girls are there already, maybe 12 and 14. They're laced up tight in their Sunday best boots and heavy dresses, collars high. They look at you with a mix of curiosity and boredom, as though you're just another piece of furniture in their day. "You'll escort them to their music lesson," Mrs. Holloway says briskly. "No shortcuts. Watch for pickpockets, and for heaven's sake don't let them run." She hands you a single coin as if it's an insult. "For your trouble," you nod. "What else can you do?" The girls pull on their gloves, thin silk things meant more for show than warmth, and the three of you step out into the frozen city. It's only a mile to the music tutor's house, but winter in London turns a mile into an odyssey. The fog's thinner today, but still clinging in the alleys, a dirty veil that softens edges and hides hazards. The girls chatter about scales and sonatas while you scan the street for trouble. Your boots crunch over patches of ice. Their boots slide, and one of them squeals when she almost falls. You catch her elbow. She snatches it back like you burned her. And this is where you see it, the absurdity of Victorian winter fashion. The girls are dressed like walking dolls. Petticoats, bustles, starched collars. Every movement is a negotiation between fabric and frostbite. They're shivering under all that clothing, cheeks blotched with cold. You're freezing too, but at least your coat's honest. Victorian style didn't pause for the weather. Even in the dead of winter, people paraded through the streets in outfits that belonged in ballrooms. Corsets so tight they limited breathing. Shoes made for parlours, not puddles. Hats heavy enough to tilt necks. There are records of women fainting at funerals simply because their stays were too tight to allow deep breaths of frigid air. Beauty as slow strangulation. You guide the girls across a bridge slick with ice. A gust of wind nearly knocks one's bonnet into the Thames. She screams and clutches it, fingers shaking. You almost laugh, but don't. She wouldn't get the joke. Here's a fringe fact. Some winter fashions were literally deadly. Crinolines, those wide, cage-like skirts, could catch fire if you stood too close to a coal grate. Fur muffs sometimes harboured lice or frostbite depending on who you bought them from. Even the dyes were toxic. Arsenic green was all the rage for dresses and gloves, and it didn't just stain fabric. It poisoned wearers slowly, starting with headaches and ending with organ failure. Scholars still debate whether the upper classes were aware of how dangerous their clothing really was. Some think they didn't know, others think they didn't care. After all, if you could afford a new dress every season, what was a little arsenic rash compared to looking fashionable? The girls are chattering again. You half listen, half scan. A man is watching from a doorway, cap low, scarf high. His eyes flicker to you, then to them. You step a little closer to the girls. He melts back into the fog. When you finally reach the tutor's house, a modest brick building with a blue door, the girls brush past you without a word. They disappear inside. The door closes. You're left on the step, exhaling clouds of breath, staring at your hands blackened still from yesterday's soot. You could leave, wander, find something to eat. But instead you sit on the curb, boots planted in a drift of half-melted snow, and watch the street. People pass in endless layers of fabric. Men with top hats tilted low. Women in gowns heavy enough to drown them if they fell into the river. Children running with shawls pulled tight. A dog limps by wearing a tiny knitted sweater. You feel the absurdity of it all, the pretense of elegance against the blunt fact of winter. When the lesson ends an hour later, the girls reappear, cheeks red, gloves damp with melted frost. You walk them back, slower this time, the fog closing in around you like a theatre curtain. Their boots squeak, your stomach growls. Mrs. Holloway thanks you with a distracted nod when you return them. She doesn't offer tea or even a crust of bread, just closes the door. You stand outside, coin in your palm, and realise it's already dark. Gas lamps flare. Smoke rises. The city exhales its cold breath once more. You tuck the coin away and turn toward home, wondering how many more winters you can dress up as a person and still survive. By the time you make it back to your street, night has already thrown its heavy blanket over London. Gas lamps flicker like tired stars, their halos distorted by fog that has thickened again, yellowish and wet like soup boiled too long. Your boots crunch across frozen refuse, bits of straw, oyster shells, paper, and each step echoes weirdly between the narrow brick rows. You're tired, but you're also alert, because nights like this breed accidents and worse. The street is full of people moving faster now, heads bent against the wind. Some clutch parcels wrapped in brown paper, others just hug themselves for warmth. A woman hurries past with a basket covered in cloth. You catch the faint, delicious smell of roasted chestnuts and instantly remember being a child, standing in line for one hot nut you couldn't afford. Behind her, a man stumbles drunkenly out of a pub, slips on the ice, and goes down hard. He doesn't get up right away. Two others help him to his feet. Everyone keeps moving. That's the rhythm of the city. Always forward, never stop. Don't look too long at what winter does to people. You pause at a corner where a notice is nailed to a post. Relief fund for the indigent poor, it proclaims, bold letters, as if anyone who needs it could read. Below, in smaller type, are instructions for applying at the parish office, Monday only, between 8 and 10 a.m. You've seen these before. They're traps more than lifelines. The paperwork alone takes hours, and the clerks treat you like a liar even if you're half dead. Still, you consider it. 2 hours of humiliation for maybe a lump of coal or a loaf of bread. Then you shake your head and walk on. Tonight's wind carries a new edge. You feel it against your cheeks, thin and slicing like a blade drawn slow. It reminds you of stories you've heard, old ones about cold snaps, so severe they became killers in their own right. There was the February of 47, when snow buried whole rows of houses, or the winter of 63, when the Thames froze hard enough to stop river traffic for weeks. People still talk about those winters as if they were monsters that visited the city, left claw marks on its walls. You wonder if this year will earn its own name. You pass an alley and hear a baby crying. Not loudly, just a thin, high note cutting through the wind. You hesitate, but don't go in. Experience has taught you that some sounds in the dark aren't what they seem. Instead, you walk faster, scarf over your mouth, eyes down. The gas lamps cast long, skeletal shadows that sway with each gust of wind. At the next corner stands a coal merchant's yard, its gate chained but not locked. Inside are mountains of black lumps glittering faintly under frost. You stare at them like a starving person might stare at bread. One bag, just one, could warm your room for a week. You even step closer to the gate, fingers curling around the cold iron. But a man in a bowler hat watches from across the street, smoking. You let go. Keep walking. Here's a fringe fact. Some parishes actually hired coal watchers to guard their supplies at night. Theft was so rampant that even the poorest neighbourhoods formed watch groups, taking turns sitting beside piles of slackened cinders to keep desperate hands away. Imagine being so cold you'd guard coal with your life. Imagine being so cold you'd risk stealing it anyway. As you turn onto Whitechapel High Street, the scene shifts again. This part of town has more light, more noise. Market stalls spill out under canvas tarps weighed down with snow. Vendors shout, their breath fogging in the gaslight, hawking everything from turnips to eels. A fiddler plays a mournful tune. A boy juggles apples, his fingers stiff, his eyes darting for customers. You can almost pretend it's lively, even festive, if you ignore the blue lips and trembling hands. You pause at a stall selling candles. The merchant is an older woman, bundled so heavily she looks like a heap of laundry. Her hands are red and cracked. She offers you a deal, 2 for a penny, but you only have enough for 1. You buy it. She nods, eyes tired but kind. You tuck the candle into your coat pocket like it's gold. There's a scholarly debate about whether the poor laws actually made winters harsher for people like you. Some historians argue the system's rigidity, its insistence on deserving versus undeserving poor, pushed countless families into deeper misery just as the cold struck hardest. Others claim the laws were a step up from nothing at all, a crude safety net in a brutal age. You don't know who's right. All you know is you're walking through a market full of people who look like they're losing a race with the weather. Past the market, the crowd thins. You turn down a quieter lane where the fog hangs heavier. The sound of the city dulls, replaced by dripping water and distant wheels. You catch a glimpse of the girl from downstairs ahead of you. She's carrying a bucket of something, maybe water, maybe coal dust. Her thin frame moves quickly, her hair hidden under a shawl. You almost call out, but she disappears into another doorway before you can. By the time you reach your building, the sky has deepened into indigo. The street lamp outside flickers once, twice, then holds. You climb the stairs slowly, legs stiff, lungs sore. Inside, your room is exactly as you left it. Dark, cold, waiting. You set the new candle on the plate, strike your last match, and watch the flame bloom. Its glow is small but defiant, throwing long shadows across the cracked plaster walls. You sit down on the bed, unwrap your scarf, and exhale. The air in here smells of damp cloth and old soot. You rub your hands together, thinking of the coal yard, the baby's cry, the girl's silk gloves, the vendor's cracked hands. All of it swirls together like the city's endless fog, ugly, necessary, inescapable. Outside, a gust rattles the window. Somewhere a church bell strikes 9. Another winter night, another round. You lie back on the straw mattress and pull the blanket over your shoulders, holding the candle's light in your eyes until it blurs. Morning comes as it always does, without warmth, without kindness. The light barely changes from the night before. It's like the city has decided dawn is a technicality not worth the trouble. You wake slowly, every joint stiff, your breath forming a mist above your face. The candle burned out sometime in the night, leaving behind a waxy crater and the smell of cold smoke. Your blanket has shifted in your sleep, exposing one foot to the air, and it takes a full minute before you can wiggle your toes again. You sit up and immediately regret it. Your back is sore, your neck stiff, and your lungs feel like they're lined with wet wool. But you've got no time to dwell on aches. There's talk of work today. Real work. You heard it last night from a man on the stairwell. A railway job. Temporary but paid. Something about clearing ice from tracks, swinging a pickaxe, hauling gravel. It's miles away, but the word paid rings in your head louder than your cough. You pull on your boots, still damp from yesterday, and shrug into your coat, which now permanently smells of smoke, old bread, and effort. Outside, the cold slaps your cheeks like it missed you overnight. The streets are frozen ribbon, slick and mean. You keep your head down, moving quick through the alleys until you reach Commercial Road, where people are already gathering near the horse-drawn carts bound for the worksite. A man with a clipboard, real authority, the kind that comes with a top hat and a wool overcoat, calls names. You don't hear yours, you didn't give one. You step forward anyway. He looks you over, no questions, just waves you into the cart. You climb aboard with 6 others, men in rough coats and mismatched gloves, every one of them carrying some version of that gaunt, winter-stretched look. The cart lurches forward. You huddle together, not for conversation, but for body heat. The railway yard is a good hour away, past the edge of Whitechapel and into the industrial gut of the city. By the time you arrive, your feet are numb and your fingers burn with that cruel kind of cold that comes just before they go dead. You hop off the cart and join a group around a man handing out tools. Picks, shovels, hammers. He shouts instructions over the wind. You catch about half of it. Mostly, you follow the others. Your job is simple. Break the ice from the iron track so trains can run. Sounds easy enough until you swing that pick the first time. The vibration climbs your arms and slams into your shoulders. You grunt and try again. The second swing's better. You find a rhythm, quick and brutal. Ice shatters in uneven chunks, skittering like glass across the ballast. Around you, the men grunt and sweat, breaths forming a fog of exertion in the air. No one talks much. The work eats up the energy needed for words. You don't know their names and likely never will. There's an understanding in this kind of labour. Shared pain is the only bond required. After an hour, your coat is soaked through with sweat and melted frost. Your fingers are raw. A man beside you slips and goes down hard, his pick bouncing off the steel rail with a terrible clang. He groans, but waves off help. There's no time to stop. The foreman makes that clear with a scowl and a tap of his pocket watch. Here's a curious thing. Early rail workers were often paid less in winter than summer, even though the work was harder and more dangerous. Icy conditions meant slower output, and slower meant less pay. No sick leave, no insurance, no unions yet. If you fell, you either got up or didn't. Someone else would fill your spot before the blood froze. You keep swinging, legs trembling now. Every muscle protests, but you ignore it. Pain is part of the trade. The heat of movement is your only defence against the wind howling across the yard. Around midday, someone passes out hard biscuits and mugs of lukewarm tea. You sip yours slowly, letting the warmth cling to your lips like a forgotten kiss. During the break, you lean against a rusted rail and look out over the yard. The city looms in the distance, all chimney smoke and pointed rooftops. It looks beautiful from here, almost like a painting. You know better. You know it's filled with soot and sickness and nights that don't end. Still, for a moment, you allow yourself to pretend. The afternoon brings more ice, thicker, more stubborn. You switch tools, using a spade to pry up frozen chunks of gravel packed between rails. Your palms blister, your knees ache. But there's a coin in this, and coin means coal, food, maybe even soap. You work like a man possessed. There's a moment, late in the day, when the light starts to fade and everything turns blue-grey. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and see your breath hang in the air like smoke. The railway stretches off into the mist. For a second, it feels like you're standing at the edge of the world. Then someone calls for you to shovel snow off the switches and the moment passes. Back to work. The sun disappears completely. Gas lamps buzz on. Your back screams. Your legs threaten to give, but you finish. You survive. You earn. The foreman gives you a coin at the end of the shift. It's cold in your hand, but it might as well be glowing. You climb back into the cart with the others, too tired to talk, faces smudged with soot and sweat. The city reappears as the cart rattles back through the outskirts. Its lights like distant stars, its alleys waiting. Back home you fumble the key, step inside and light the last stub of candle. You drop the coin onto the table like a trophy. Then you sit down, strip off your boots, and stare at your red, swollen hands. You think of the rails, the ice, the train whistles in the distance. You earned warmth today. Not much, but something. The Thames is breathing again. That's the first thing you notice the next morning. An odd rhythmic mist rising from the river like it's exhaling. It looks almost peaceful, curling above the water in slow, dreamy tendrils. But you know better. It's winter, and nothing is gentle without a price. You stand on the edge of the London Bridge, boots slick with frost, watching the current move sluggishly under a hard crust of broken ice. Chunks drift past, scraping and grinding, bumping against pilings like bones in a frozen soup. You're not here for sightseeing. Word spread last night that the river might be freezing again, fully this time. Properly, dangerously, maybe even fantastically. You had to see it for yourself. It's been decades since the last proper freeze, the kind that halts traffic, traps barges, and turns the river into a solid plain of grey-white death. You've heard the stories, the old stories, of people walking across it, dancing on it, selling pies on it. A frost fair, they called it. You scoffed at first, but now, staring down at the half-frozen water, you feel it. Something strange is happening. The cold's been worse this week, sharper, thicker. You can feel it in your teeth, in your bones. People talk about the weather like it's a visitor who's overstayed its welcome, and yet there's a kind of electricity in the air today too. That dangerous, gleeful hum that buzzes through a crowd before something foolish and unforgettable happens. Along the banks, people are gathering. Not many yet, just the bold ones. You see children throwing rocks at the ice, testing the thickness. A butcher in a blood-stained apron walks out a few feet onto the frozen shallows, arms spread like a tightrope walker. He grins when he doesn't fall in. You edge down toward the water yourself. The steps are slick with frost, the stones slicker still with algae beneath the freeze. The Thames up close is terrifying, wide, dark, unpredictable. You test the edge with your foot. The ice holds. Sort of. It's not solid enough to walk on, not yet, but give it a few more days of this cold. Maybe. You've seen rats frozen in place near the docks, pigeons with icicles hanging from their wings. The city is stiffening, and that brings you to the heart of it, the frost fairs. London's favourite ghost stories. The last real one was in 1814, they say. They printed pamphlets, held puppet shows, roasted oxen on the riverbank. Someone even set up a printing press right there on the ice and sold little cards that read, "Printed on the Thames." The fair was loud, absurd, reckless. People drinking and gambling like the river wasn't a death trap beneath their feet. You ask an old man near you, scarf up to his eyebrows, breath wheezing between yellow teeth, if he remembers the last fair. "I was a boy," he says, eyes foggy with something more than cold. "They said it wouldn't happen again. Said the river's too fast now, too choked with muck, but look at it, look." He gestures toward the ice, grinning. She's slowing down, and she is. The water looks tired, like it's folding in on itself. A fringe fact? In the thickest freezes, even coffins from riverside cemeteries would be lifted by the ice. People swore they saw the dead bobbing up with their arms outstretched, like they were trying to claw back into the world. Probably apocryphal, probably. Still, the Thames has always had a taste for the dramatic, but not everyone's celebrating. Along the docks, the bargemen are grim-faced. Ice means stalled trade. No deliveries, no wages. Ships get stuck midstream, and supplies rot in the hold. You hear a man shouting from one boat, his voice thick with panic. "Rations are low," he bellows. "We can't sit here 2 more days." No one listens. Or they do, and they just don't care. And here's something else. The city is colder than it used to be. That much is agreed on by most scientists, at least the ones not arguing over beetle populations or sunspot activity. Some call it the Little Ice Age, a freakish downturn in global temperatures that's been hanging on since the 14th century, they say. Others blame volcanic eruptions or changes in solar radiation. But down here, among the coal smoke and the frost, all you know is that your eyelashes keep freezing together and your boots crunch louder with every step. By midday, a small fire has been lit right on the frozen edge. A man is selling mulled wine in tin cups. You have a few coppers from yesterday's rail job and spend one. The cup is warm against your fingers, sweet with cloves and a splash of something stronger. It's probably half vinegar, but you sip it anyway, just to feel your throat burn. The crowd is growing. People are gathering near Blackfriars, talking about building booths, setting up stalls, just like the old stories. Someone's hammering together a makeshift table with broken cratewood. A boy offers to carve your name onto a coin for the fair. It's madness. It's beautiful. And yet, just a few steps from all this mischief, the reality of the freeze is written in small tragedies. You pass a man lying near the embankment, curled into himself, unmoving. His breath fogs the air, barely, but he doesn't stir. 2 women pass him, glancing once before pulling their shawls tighter. He's not dead, not yet, but close. That's the other truth of the Thames in winter. It takes, and it takes quietly. People fall in and vanish before they hit the surface. Ice cracks and closes without a sound. You could be 2 feet away and never notice. And even if someone hears a scream, what can they do? You toss the rest of your wine into the river and watch the red liquid disappear into the ice. As the sun dips behind the city's soot-stained skyline, the temperature drops again. You can feel it like a tide, rising cold, the kind that burns. You button your coat higher and step away from the river. Not far, just enough to live to see if it freezes for real. You head home as the gas lamps flicker on, one by one, lighting your way like breadcrumbs through a fairy tale. You keep thinking about the old man's words. She's slowing down. And maybe she is. Maybe this year London will dance on the Thames again, or maybe it'll just drown in its own cold breath. Either way, the ice is coming. You've always suspected weather was personal, vindictive almost. And this morning confirms it. The moment you crack open the door to the street, a gust of wind punches you straight in the face, like it's been waiting all night just to take the swing. It brings with it a fresh wave of wet snow, not the picturesque flurry you'd find on a greeting card, but the slushy, grimy kind that clings to rooftops like mould and turns streets into rivers of grey soup. And the cold, Lord, the cold, doesn't even pretend to be polite anymore. It's not just outdoors now, it's inside you, in your bones, under your skin. You could wrap yourself in every curtain in the city and still feel it gnawing at your ribs. You've got a job today. Not a real job, those are for the living, but a commission of sorts. A delivery for Mr. Parker, the tailor with the milky eye and the temper of a wasp. He needs fabric taken from his shop in Soho all the way across the river to a client in Southwark, which means navigating the city's worst terrain while wearing boots that have split at the sole. He doesn't offer coin, of course. Just says, do this right and I might have need for you again. The usual bait. The hope of continuity, of something more than one-day desperation. You don't say no. So here you are, treading through wet snow in a city that seems to be actively trying to drown itself. Every corner floods into the next. The gutters overflow. Icicles snap off rooftops like knives, shattering on the stone below. You keep your head down, scarf tight, and pray your feet hold out. As you cross Holborn, the air gets thicker again, and not from snow. Fog, dense and oily, rolls in from somewhere, mixing with chimney smoke until it's impossible to tell whether you're inhaling water or soot. It tastes like rust and old pennies. Somewhere up ahead a man shouts, then coughs hard enough to sound like he's choking on a lung. No one stops. You don't either. The snow, the fog, the wind, everything conspires to make the journey take twice as long. You pass a woman selling potatoes from a cart half buried in snow. She's got a candle inside a jam jar, trying to keep her hands warm. Her face is cracked from the cold, red and scaly like a lizard's. She doesn't speak, just gestures to the potatoes. You shake your head, offer a sympathetic glance, and keep going. You cross the river by footbridge. The Thames isn't fully frozen yet, but it's trying. Sheets of slush bump against the banks like drunk ghosts. The ice that forms in the shallows is layered like old glass, greenish and cracked. A small boat is wedged halfway between two piers, its oars abandoned, its hull leaning at an angle that screams surrender. And here, standing in the middle of the bridge, you see them. Two men in long coats, staring down at the river, as if they're waiting for something to crawl out of it. They're talking quietly, too quietly, and when one turns and sees you, he narrows his eyes like he's measuring your temperature. You nod, keep walking. No interest in whatever arrangement they're working on. Not today. By the time you reach Southwark, the package in your coat is damp and your gloves are soaked through. You deliver the fabric to a skinny man with ink-stained fingers who barely grunts when you hand it over. About time, he says, then closes the door in your face. No pay, no food, just another name to cross off the list of people you thought might help. You lean against a brick wall for a moment, flexing your hands, trying to remember the last time you were truly warm. Not just lukewarm or less cold, but truly, deeply warm. It's a memory that comes only in bits now. A flash of a fire, a laugh near an oven, gone. This is where things get weird. You head back toward the river, hoping the fog has lifted. Instead, you find it worse. The air has turned thick and yellow, like the city is exhaling poison. You pull your scarf tighter, but it doesn't matter. It gets in anyway, through your eyes, your nose, down your throat. Every breath tastes like an old chimney. You cough until you see stars, and then you hear it. Voices in the fog, not shouting, not panic, just murmuring, Low and steady, like a prayer circle you're not invited to. You stop, try to listen, can't make out the words. Just that tone. Calm, wrong, too calm for this storm. You turn a corner and nearly trip over a man kneeling in the snow. He's whispering to himself, bare hands pressed against the icy pavement. His clothes are soaked through, his beard crusted with frost. You ask if he's all right, but he doesn't respond, just keeps whispering. You don't understand a word. People are strange in the cold. That's always been true. There are old records, fringe stuff, about winter-induced madness, frostbite that starts in the fingers and ends in the brain. Cases of people stripping naked in snowdrifts convinced they're burning up. Others who walk into the Thames thinking it's a road. Some say the cold itself talks to them, gives instructions. That's nonsense, of course. But standing here, listening to this man mutter in the fog, you feel something primal press at the back of your skull. You back away and keep walking, faster now. And here's the scholarly debate everyone keeps missing. How much did winter shape the psyche of the Victorian poor? We know it killed, starved, froze. But how many minds did it break? What's the mental toll of waking up every morning unsure if you'll see nightfall because your fingers stopped working or your lungs gave out? That's not data they recorded. But it lingers in the literature, in the gaps, in the silence between census numbers. By the time you get back to your street, your legs feel like iron rods. You don't remember the last mile of the walk, just a blur of ice and stone. When you reach your stoop, the girl from below is sitting there, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the sky. Going to snow again, she says, not looking at you. Isn't it always? You answer. She shrugs. This one feels different. You don't argue. You're too tired. You push open your door and fall inside, not bothering to take your boots off. You sit in the middle of the floor, shaking from cold, thinking about the man whispering in the fog and the river trying to freeze. Your breath fogs the air, you light your candle. The silence closes in. It begins with rumours, like most things in London do. Softly spoken in bread lines, muttered under layers of scarf and frostbite, exchanged like secrets in alleyways. They're building stalls, someone says near the docks. Pitchers on the ice, proper ones. Another swears he saw a man roasting chestnuts from a barrel right in the middle of the Thames. Then comes the headline, printed on cheap grey paper that flakes apart in your hands. Frost fair in full bloom. Vendors brave the frozen Thames. You don't believe it at first. Not really. It's too absurd. The river, the same Thames that eats people and drags down barges and doesn't let go. That Thames? You shake your head. Surely not. And yet. It's the third week of this deep cold now, and the river's been still for days. You haven't heard the lapping of water or the creak of boats in almost a week. The air is so dry it stings your nose, and the fog has stopped rising entirely, frozen mid-exhale. Everything feels held in place, suspended, like time has agreed to freeze with the rest of the city. You follow the crowds. That's how you know something's real in London, when enough people start drifting in one direction without needing to ask why. They shuffle across Blackfriars Bridge in groups, bundled in every scrap of cloth they own. Kids on sleds, men with carts, women carrying flasks and blankets and bags of sweets. You fall in beside them. The buzz of it is irresistible. When you reach the riverbank, your breath catches. The Thames has become a stage. Dozens of stalls dot the surface, crudely assembled from crates and salvaged shutters. Someone's hammered together a makeshift pub from the back of a delivery cart. There's a puppet show, 2 boys in moth-eaten velvet pulling strings behind a curtain of old sailcloth. Further down, someone set up a printing press on a wobbly table, stamping the words Frost Fair 1875 across small squares of card. "Printed on the Thames," the man shouts, his ink-stained fingers stiff with cold. "Proof you are here." You step onto the ice slowly, half expecting it to groan or crack beneath your weight. It doesn't. It holds. There's snow packed thick on top, mixed with soot and crushed candy wrappers, and the chill radiating up from below your boots is enough to make your legs ache. And yet, there's laughter. Actual laughter. Kids are running. Someone's trying to dance to a fiddle tune. A man in a fur hat is selling eels on a stick. A woman is reading fortunes from a teacup and 3 stained playing cards. For the first time in weeks, you see faces not twisted in grim determination, but wide-eyed, flushed, and somehow hopeful. You pass a couple holding hands wrapped in layers of wool and velvet, their cheeks pink with cold. They lean in to kiss, the ice creaking faintly under their boots. Just ahead, a group of chimney sweeps. Not boys like you'd expect, but adults now. Former boys who survived long enough to get tall, have lit a fire in an iron brazier and are roasting chestnuts and trading old soot stories like war veterans. You recognise one of them, Billy, who used to sleep 3 floors below you. He sees you, grins and waves you over. "Still alive then?" he asks, voice hoarse but friendly. "Barely." He tosses you a chestnut. It's hot, almost too hot, and when you bite into it, the warmth is so shocking that it makes your eyes sting. Not from heat, from the memory of comfort, of taste. "Don't get used to it," Billy says, watching you chew. "Once the thaw comes, this all goes with it. Back to the crawl." He means the streets, the grind, the grey routine of trying not to die. But right now, here on the river, you let yourself pretend otherwise. Fringe fact: frost fairs were more than just novelty. For a few days or weeks, depending on the cold, they offered real income. For those with something to sell, it was an economic lifeline. Scribes, bakers, chimney sweeps, beggars turned vendors. Even pickpockets made a killing, blending into the crowd and vanishing between stalls like ghosts. And yes, accidents happened. Holes in the ice, sudden cracks, lost boots, lost dogs, lost people. But that was the price of wonder. You walk on, boots crunching over hard-packed snow, until you reach a man selling Thames gin, a cloudy liquid in brown glass bottles that looks like poison and tastes worse. You buy a swig anyway, because the warmth it offers is better than the burn. He nods, his face as red as a cooked ham, and pours you a second shot free of charge. "To the river," he says, "to her mercy." Scholars have long argued over whether the frost fairs were acts of defiance or desperation. Some call them celebrations of London's grit, a refusal to bow to the elements. Others see them as illusions, frantic distractions from starvation, from death hiding under the snow. Maybe they're both. You don't care. All you know is that people are smiling. You wander back toward the bridge, pockets lighter but chest a little fuller. As you turn to look one last time at the fair, you catch a strange sight. A small table covered in black cloth. A man behind it. He's not selling anything, just sitting, watching, as if he's taking notes on everyone who passes. His eyes meet yours. He doesn't smile, just taps his pen once slowly on the table. You shiver, not from the cold, from something else. That night, back in your room, you write your name on a scrap of paper and add the date. Frost Fair, 1875. You tuck it into your coat. A souvenir. Proof you were here. Outside, the river is silent again. The firelight from the ice dances on your walls. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you fall asleep thinking of something other than survival. You fall asleep dreaming of snowflakes and laughter and warm chestnuts on frozen water. The dream doesn't last. It never does. By morning, the river is still frozen, but the laughter's gone. The crowds have thinned, the music faded. You wake up coughing again, this time harsher than before, and your chest feels like it's full of broken glass. The joy of the frost fair lingers only in your coat, the scrap of paper still tucked into your pocket like a memory you're trying to protect from the damp. Everything else has returned to the usual grey grind. There's a rattle in your breathing now, a crackle with every inhale that doesn't belong. It started 2 nights ago, subtle at first, like an echo. But this morning it's louder, persistent. You sit up in bed and cough until your vision blurs. When you finally stop, you realise your throat is bleeding a little. Just a thin smear on your sleeve. Nothing dramatic, just enough to tell you something is wrong. You wrap your scarf tight and venture out, hoping a walk might loosen your lungs. It doesn't, but it does bring you somewhere new. Near Spitalfields, tucked between a row of dying shops, there's a sign you've never noticed before. Dr. Whitcomb, physician of the chest and spirits. It sounds like a scam, but your curiosity wins. Or maybe it's the fever humming under your skin. You enter the office and immediately regret it. The place smells like boiled herbs, old ink, and something sharper, metallic. The doctor is a tall, grey figure with wire-rimmed spectacles and a stare like he's measuring your mortality in percentages. You don't say much. You don't have to. He hears your cough and raises one brow. "Sit," he says, motioning toward a rickety chair beside the window. "And breathe." You do as you're told. He listens, taps your chest, asks if you've ever been to the country. You laugh. then cough so hard you nearly fall off the chair. He mutters. What you've got isn't unusual. Not this winter. It's bronchial, possibly consumption, possibly not. Which is worse, you ask. He shrugs. That depends. Are you planning to survive until spring? You try to smile. Fail. He scribbles something on a slip of paper and hands it to you. Laudanum mixed with linseed oil will make you feel like you're getting better, even if you're not. Take sparingly. Laudanum. That bittersweet Victorian cure-all. Part painkiller, part poison, part placebo. You've heard stories. People cured by it, addicted to it, killed by it. It's made from opium and alcohol, thick as syrup and twice as dangerous. Still, it's better than nothing, and nothing is what you've got plenty of. You take the prescription to a chemist around the corner. The shop smells like mould and mint. The chemist is a young man with fingers stained yellow from tinctures. He fills your bottle without a word, wraps it in paper and sends you on your way. You don't take the medicine right away. You carry it home, staring at the amber liquid sloshing in the bottle. At your building, you pass the girl from downstairs. Again. She looks worse today. Pale. Gaunt. Dark smudges under her eyes. You nod. She doesn't. In your room, you take a sip. Just one. It tastes like licorice and fire and makes your tongue go numb. Within minutes, the pain in your chest dulls and your cough eases. The world tilts pleasantly. The hunger in your stomach becomes distant. Almost funny. You lie back and float. Not asleep, not awake. Just adrift. And in that haze, you remember the old cures. The ones they swore by before science stepped in. In the old days, people treated winter illnesses with everything from honey-wrapped onions to hot bricks at the foot of the bed. Camphor rubbed on the chest. Vinegar-soaked rags tied around the neck. Some drank kerosene. Others swore by mustard plasters. Pungent burning poultices that left skin red and raw but drew out the sickness, or so they said. You even knew a man who stuffed garlic in his ears during the frost, convinced it would purify the brain. But Victorian medicine was a strange hybrid, half superstition, half miracle. For every patient saved by a newly discovered antiseptic, another was bled out by leeches. For every successful surgery, someone else choked to death on a spoonful of mercury. Fringe fact. There were tonics sold in London during this period that claimed to cure frost poisoning, a condition that didn't exist, but sounded convincing enough to warrant a hefty price. Made from chalk, gin and beetroot. Basically coloured liquor. People drank gallons. You take another sip of laudanum. The room grows fuzzier around the edges. The pain in your chest fades into a low hum. You understand now why people vanish into this stuff, why they let go. There's a scholarly argument about this, of course, about whether the popularity of Victorian tonics was due to ignorance or intentional numbness. Were people fooled, or did they just want to believe? Was the bottle a hope for health, or a gentle way to surrender? The answer, as always, is both. You drift into sleep sometime near dusk. When you wake, it's dark again. Your candle has burned halfway down. Your lungs ache, but less than before. Outside, the wind howls. You pull your blanket tighter and cough softly into your sleeve. The laudanum bottle sits on the floor beside you like a patient friend. And though you wouldn't say it out loud, a small part of you hopes the river never thaws. That maybe, just maybe, the frost is keeping something worse at bay. You wake to a sound you can't place. Not coughing, not rats, not wind. It's softer than all that, almost rhythmic. You lie there, blinking in the candlelight, your body heavy from the laudanum, your mind sludgy as molasses, and listen. There it is again. A faint scratching. Not urgent, not loud, just persistent. Like something trying to be noticed but too polite to interrupt. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is cold enough to sting through your socks. You shuffle to the door and crack it open. Nothing. Hallway's empty. Dim light bleeds up from the landing below. You hear the scratch again. Lower this time. You glance down, and that's when you see them. 2 cats, sitting just outside your door. They stare up at you like you've been expected. One is a mangy tabby with ears like torn paper. The other's a sleek black thing with a chunk missing from its tail. Both look underfed. Both look perfectly at home. You don't ask why they're here. There's a rule in this city about cats. You don't question them. You just let them in or face whatever bad luck they've come to warn you about. So you open the door wider and step aside. They stroll in like they own the place. The black one curls up on your mattress instantly. The tabby sits beside the laudanum bottle and blinks at you slowly. There's a story you once heard, an old East End tale, about a woman who kept a cat in every window to ward off winter ghosts. Said the creatures could see the cold spirits before they took hold. Not sure if it's true, but tonight, you're not taking chances. Besides, company is company. You wrap yourself in your blanket and sit by the window, watching the frost creep across the glass like ivy. Outside, the snow is falling again, thick and quiet, the kind that muffles the city into silence. The fog has pulled back a little, revealing crooked rooftops and lantern glow. You spot a man dragging a cart with something heavy and long, bundled in canvas. Could be firewood, could be something else. London has a way of keeping its secrets under wraps. The cats don't flinch. The black one begins to purr, deep, slow, the kind that vibrates into the floorboards. It feels oddly soothing, like the sound is shaking the cold out of your bones. You stand and head to the stairwell, careful not to disturb them. Outside, near the bins, you find a slice of salt pork wrapped in old newspaper, frozen solid, likely dropped or tossed. You don't ask questions. You bring it upstairs, thaw it near the candle, and divide it between yourself and your new companions. They eat without ceremony. You do too. This is how survival works now, quietly, in small shared victories. After the meal, you lie back and let your mind drift. The laudanum still lingers in your veins, softening the world around the edges. Your thoughts turn to animals, to the creatures who endure these winters without beds or fire. You've seen dogs curled up in coal bins, rats nesting in piles of discarded wool, horses standing motionless in the snow with steam rising off their backs like ghosts escaping their skin. Fringe fact. There was once a dog in the East End known as Captain. No one knew who owned him, or if anyone ever had. He was massive, some kind of mastiff mix, and used to patrol the markets, snatching bread crusts and sleeping near the fishmongers' stalls. One winter, someone knit him a scarf. A week later, someone else added a coat. Eventually, he wore a full outfit, hat and all. People said touching him brought luck. When he died, they buried him under a pub's front step. Now, they say you can still hear him padding through the fog on especially cold nights, sniffing for dropped meat. You look down at the cats again. They've curled together now, tails wrapped around each other, eyes closed, completely trusting the frail warmth of your room. It's hard not to envy them. Their quiet certainty, their effortless calm. While people stumble through the streets coughing blood and begging for coal, the cats just exist. Unbothered, unburdened. There's an old superstition you remember now, something about animals sensing death. How they stay close when they know the end is near. A comfort or a warning, depending on how you want to read it. Tonight, you choose comfort. You have to. You wrap yourself tighter and close your eyes, letting the purring lull you into a kind of peace. Outside, snow keeps falling. The wind picks up. Somewhere down the street, a glass bottle shatters. Somewhere else, a woman laughs, sharp, tired, bitter. The kind of laugh you only hear when warmth and reason have long since fled. And then a new sound joins the night. The soft, wet shuffling of paws in the alley. You glance out the window and spot them. More animals. A fox limping past a broken crate. A bird hopping awkwardly, wings hunched against the cold. A rat big enough to carry off a kitten if it felt ambitious. The alley is alive with movement, quiet and methodical, as if the city's unofficial residents are holding council. Maybe they are. There's an unspoken rule between the living things of London. Stay warm, stay fed, stay invisible. It's a shared understanding, one not taught, but absorbed through the cracks in the pavement and the chinks in the walls. And here's something historians always miss. The way animals shape the story of winter. The way their behaviour mirrors the people. When the cats vanish, people know something terrible is coming. When the birds stop singing, the frost is near. When the dogs start howling, someone's died nearby. None of it's written in official records, but you learn quickly not to ignore the signs. Back inside, you stroke the tabby's matted fur. He grumbles but leans into your hand. The black one opens a single golden eye, then closes it again. Trust, earned with a single piece of pork. You lie there listening to their breathing, steady and real, and decide to let the candle burn through the night. The flicker makes the shadows dance across the walls like something alive, something ancient. Eventually sleep comes. Not easy, but thick, dreamless, heavy. The kind of sleep that feels earned. In the middle of the night you wake once, just briefly. The tabby is perched on your chest watching you. Not in fear, not in warning, just watching. Like he's making sure you're still breathing. You close your eyes again. Let the watchers keep watch. You wake to quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like the city is holding its breath. A stillness that doesn't sit right in your chest. The cats are gone. No trace of them, not even a patch of fur on the blanket. You sit up slowly, limbs aching, lungs tight. The laudanum has worn off, and the pain returns like an unwelcome friend. You cough into your sleeve, see the spot of blood, and mutter something that's not quite a curse and not quite a prayer. Outside, the skies are washed out grey, the kind of colour that makes time meaningless. You don't know if it's morning or noon. You don't really care. The cold is worse today. Not just colder, heavier. It feels personal, like the frost is looking for you, seeping under doors, whispering in cracks, waiting for you to step outside without your scarf tied right. You pull on your coat, check the laudanum bottle, half full, and slip it into your pocket. The street is quieter than usual, muffled even more by fresh snowfall, the kind that looks soft but hides ice underneath. You tread carefully, hands buried deep in your pockets, eyes scanning for danger, or maybe just something to distract you from the ache in your chest. You end up near Bethnal Green, though you're not sure how. Your feet just sort of carry you there. That happens sometimes in the city. You think you're going somewhere, but the streets have their own plans, and what you find, tucked behind a crumbling wall of faded advertisements and ivy-covered brick, is a funeral procession. Small, private. 4 men carrying a simple pine box, a woman trailing behind in black lace, holding the hand of a child who looks too calm. The kind of calm that only comes from seeing too much too early. There's no priest, no choir, no paid mourners or floral displays, just the crunch of boots on snow and the occasional low sob from the woman. You stop. You're not sure why. You don't know them. But something about the scene holds you in place. The way the snow falls silently around them. The way the box is just small enough to suggest it's not an adult inside. The way no one else on the street pays attention. In Victorian London, mourning is a performance, usually. For those with means, it's a grand spectacle. Widow's weeds, black gloves, black veils, jet jewellery, handkerchiefs stitched with the initials of the deceased, whole shops dedicated to grief, mourning tailors, mourning photographers, mourning etiquette books. There are rules for how long to grieve and how loudly, when to move from black to lavender, when to remarry. Death is a social currency for the wealthy. But not here. Not with these 4 men, this one woman, this one too still child. This is mourning in its rawest form, grief stripped of ritual, the kind of funeral that happens every day in winter and gets no ink in the papers. You follow them, quietly, until they reach a small chapel. The door opens, they disappear inside, you stay outside. Something about it feels too intimate for a stranger to witness. You lean against the stone wall and listen to the faint echo of a hymn inside. It's off-key, soft, sung by tired voices, but it's real. A fringe fact. During the harshest winters, burials became impossible. The ground froze too hard to dig, so coffins piled up in vaults or sheds behind churches. Some bodies stayed there for weeks, even months, before they could be lowered into the ground. Rats got into the cheaper boxes. The smell was legendary. The chapel door opens again, and the small procession emerges, minus the box. The woman walks ahead now, shoulders squared, but the child looks back once, right at you. You freeze. The look isn't sad. It's not curious. It's something else entirely. A kind of understanding. Like they know you've been there too, standing at some graveside alone, wishing the cold would swallow everything. They vanish around the corner. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. You wander a bit more, eventually ending up near a stall selling ribbon and lace. The woman behind the cart calls to you. Looking for mourning trim, she asks cheerfully, as if selling hats. On sale today. Black for the men, lavender for the ladies. You shake your head. She shrugs. Suit yourself. But it never hurts to be prepared. She's not wrong. People drop like flies in winters like these. Old ones, young ones, the sick, the poor, the forgotten. There's a saying. In London, winter does the sorting. And lately, you've started to wonder which side of the ledger your name is on. You head home slowly. Laudanum burning a hole in your coat pocket. Lungs rattling. You pass a funeral photographer's shop. In the window, a display of portraits. Men in stiff collars with their eyes closed. Women propped on velvet chairs with hands folded. Children lying peacefully on cushions with doll-like expressions. Post-mortem photography, they call it. A final likeness. Proof they existed. Proof they were loved. Some say it's morbid. You're not sure. You think there's something honest in it. After all, death is the most consistent thing in the city. More than taxes, more than fog, more than rats or rumours. And in winter it becomes a roommate. Always there, just behind the door. You think about the girl downstairs. The way her eyes have grown duller this past week. The way her steps are slower, like the cold is dragging her down. You wonder if she'll last the season. You wonder if you will. Back at your building, you pause outside her door. You don't knock. You just stand there, listening. No sounds, no coughing, nothing. Eventually you move on. In your room, you take a small sip from the bottle, just enough to dull the ache, just enough to make the walls blur a little. You sit by the window and watch the street below, where a black carriage waits outside someone's door. A man emerges with a rolled-up rug slung over his shoulder. You know it's not a rug. Outside, the snow falls heavier now. Not soft, not silent. Angry, thick. It clings to everything, swallowing footprints before they can finish forming. You press your hand against the glass. It's so cold it burns. You think you've seen every kind of death the city has to offer, but you haven't. Not yet. The graveyard at Bunhill Fields is overflowing again. Literally. You hear about it in the morning, when the news reaches your street like a bad smell carried by wind. 3 pauper coffins left above ground overnight. Not on purpose, just nowhere to put them. The gravediggers tried to bury them, but the ground's too hard, frozen solid like iron. The men gave up sometime before dawn and staggered off to find gin and forgiveness. You eat the last crust of bread in your room, barely more than a bite. It's stale enough to crack a tooth. You don't care. Your stomach has given up complaining and now just grumbles like an old man muttering in his sleep. You tug on your coat, which seems to grow thinner by the day, and make your way through the snow-choked streets, headed toward the graveyard. Not because you have business there, but because something in your bones tells you to go. The walk is long and slow. Snow crunches underfoot in brittle layers, each step louder than the last. You pass rows of houses with black bunting on the doors, more this week than last. A woman throws out a pan of frozen water and watches it shatter on the steps. The pieces skitter down like glass. She doesn't even blink. When you arrive, the scene is quiet but raw. A few figures stand at the edge of the field, heads low, coats pulled tight. The 3 coffins are just sitting there. Not grand ones. These aren't men of means. The wood is pale and unfinished, the kind that warps in damp and cracks in frost. One is smaller than the others. You don't ask who they are. No one seems to know. Or maybe no one wants to say. They could be anyone. Workers, beggars, children from the foundling hospital. It doesn't matter. They're bodies without headstones, without prayers. Just waiting, and that's what haunts you. The waiting. There's a man nearby with a shovel, his face red from cold and embarrassment. He's trying again, poking at the ground with short, angry jabs. The metal clangs against frozen earth, and he lets out a grunt that turns into a growl. You offer to help, but he waves you off. No point, he says, panting. Ground won't give. Not even an inch. And that's the truth. In winters like this, the city turns crueler than usual. The living suffer, but the dead? They're left in limbo, stacked in corners, laid in sheds, wrapped in tarps and stored in vaults that stink of cold meat and spoiled air. You've heard of mass graves used in winters past. Trenches dug in haste when the deaths came too quickly to count. Bodies laid shoulder to shoulder, then covered with lime and dirt and the weight of indifference. Most people didn't even get names, just numbers. A ledger somewhere in the parish office with smudged ink and forgotten columns. Fringe fact. There was a theory back in the day that bodies left unburied too long could bring on more sickness. Not because of rot, that took time, but because of miasma, bad air, the invisible fog of death, rising from the skin and the mouth and the places the soul had fled. Some claim they could see it in the mist, swirling shapes in the morning fog, reaching, twisting. Probably nonsense, but still. You step closer to the smallest coffin. Your boots crunch through a patch of brittle ice, and the sound makes everyone turn. You freeze, caught mid-step like a thief. but no one speaks. They just turn back toward the graves, or the lack of them, and pretend they didn't hear. You kneel by the box and wipe the snow from its top. It's light, not nailed shut, and you realise you're the only one kneeling. Everyone else stays upright, back stiff. You rest your hand on the wood and feel the cold seep into your skin. You wonder who they were. You wonder if someone is still looking for them. You wonder if they had a name that was ever spoken with love. That's what pauper graves steal first, names. Scholars love to argue about this, of course, whether Victorian burial practices for the poor were negligent or simply a product of limited resources. Some defend the system, pointing out that at least there was a system. Others condemn it entirely, a factory line of death, efficient and soulless. You stand somewhere in the middle. You understand the weight of bodies in winter. You understand the cost of dignity. A bell tolls in the distance. 3 chimes. Someone mutters a verse under their breath. It's not a priest, just an old woman in black, holding a candle stub with a flame barely clinging to life. She whispers something about mercy. You don't know who she's praying for. You stay until the shovel man gives up again and walks away, muttering curses into his scarf. The others follow one by one, no ceremony, no finish, just quiet and snow and 3 boxes still waiting. You walk home slowly, each step heavier than the last. The sky above you is empty, blank as the ledger page where those names should have been. You pass a wall covered in posters, ads for patent medicines, lost dogs, theatre plays long since cancelled. One flyer reads, "Warm your soul with hope. Services this Sunday at St Giles." You keep walking. Back in your room you sit on the floor staring at the laudanum bottle. You don't touch it tonight. You want to feel the cold. You want to remember, because someone has to. You start noticing things after a while. Not the obvious things. Ice, hunger, smoke, but the little ones. Like how the fog behaves differently at night. How it thickens more in certain streets, clings tighter to corners and doorways. How the gas lamps flicker in patterns, as if trying to speak a language no one remembers. Or how, in some alleys, you can't hear your own footsteps, like the sound gets swallowed up before it reaches your ears. It's enough to make you wonder whether London is changing, or whether you are. Tonight you're out later than usual, no particular reason. The flat is colder than the street, and the laudanum makes the walls feel like they're leaning in. So you wrap your coat tight, pocket a crust of bread you found under a stack of papers, and drift. Some part of you tells you not to, but that part is quiet now, drowned out by boredom, fever, and something like curiosity. The gas lamps glow dimly through the fog, hazy circles of light, too weak to show anything useful. You pass a man slumped against a butcher's shop, hat tipped over his face. Could be drunk, could be dead. You don't check. London's got its own triage system. If they're not screaming, you keep walking. The further you go, the stranger it gets. Down near Shoreditch, you notice the lamps are spaced differently, a little too close together, or maybe a few are missing. It's hard to tell. The fog here is like cotton wool, thick and soft, but smothering. You can barely see your hands. Your boots scuff something metallic. You look down and see a gas cap, one of the underground access points where the lamplighters do their maintenance. It's ajar. That's not right. You kneel, touch it. It's warm. Odd, considering how cold everything else is. You listen. Nothing. But there's a faint hum under your feet, like the city's whispering through its pipes. You stand and move on. You're not in the mood for mysteries, but they're in the mood for you. Just ahead the fog shifts and you see someone. Not just a shadow, but a figure. Tall, stiff, standing beneath a lamp that flickers between yellow and sickly green. You can't see their face, just the outline. But what you do see is the light bouncing off their clothes. Shiny. Not from moisture. From polish. Leather maybe, or oilskin. They don't move, not even a tilt of the head. You pause. You've learned not to speak first, not out here. The figure takes a step back into the fog and vanishes. You wait. You're not sure why. Then you keep walking a little faster now, heart thudding in your ears. The lamps flicker more violently the deeper you go. One goes out entirely. Another buzzes like it's full of bees. You pass a boarded-up shop front with a broken window. Inside there's a figure in the shadows watching you. Or maybe it's just your reflection, bent by warped glass. Welcome to night in Victorian London. And here's a fringe fact you've only heard in whispers. There are people, official, educated people, who believe the fog has a mind of its own. Not metaphorically, literally. That something in the mix of soot, coal, steam and decay creates a living atmosphere. That consciousness can form where there's enough confusion and neglect. They've written papers about it, had them laughed out of universities. But down here, on nights like this, it doesn't sound so absurd. You start heading back. You've gone too far. You pass a boy dragging a sack behind him. He doesn't look up. You glance inside the sack as you pass. Can't tell what's in it, but it's heavy, wet. You pick up your pace. At the corner of a dead-end alley you see the figure again. The leather, the lamp. This time, they raise a hand. Not to wave, just up. Like they're signalling a halt. You stop. The fog thickens between you like a curtain, and when it lifts again, they're gone. You feel something then. Pressure. Like the air's too thick to breathe. Like you've stepped into a room that was sealed long ago. You turn around fast, half expecting someone to be behind you. Nothing. But the lamp above you flickers, then bursts. Not a sound, just dark. You run. Your boots slip on the cobbles, catch on frozen ruts. You race past doors with no numbers, windows with curtains drawn tight. A dog barks once and goes silent. When you finally reach the busier street, Fleet Street, you think, you stop, hands on knees, lungs burning. The gas lamps here are brighter. People walk with purpose again. A woman in a green cloak, a man carrying coal. You're safe, sort of. As safe as anyone can be in a city that eats its young. And here's something scholars do agree on. Victorian London at night was another city entirely. Not just darker, but altered. More accidents, more disappearances, more crime. Police records from the period mention people simply vanishing between lampposts. Eyewitnesses claiming they saw shapes in the fog. It was chalked up to drink or fear or fog-induced hysteria. But not all of it was delusion. Some corners of London weren't mapped properly for years, not because no one tried, but because the streets changed. Buildings appeared where there were none the day before. Entire blocks disappeared in city records, only to return months later fully occupied, and always, always worse in winter. As if the frost changed the bones of the city. You stumble back to your street just after midnight. You look over your shoulder twice before climbing the stairs. Your hands shake as you fumble for the candle and match. When the flame flares to life, you sigh. Not from relief, but from the sense that something chose to let you go. You sit on the bed, breathing shallowly, lungs rattling. You do not take laudanum tonight. You need your mind sharp. You press your ear to the floor, listening for the girl downstairs. You hear nothing. You blow out the candle and wait. By morning, the cold has gone from cruel to theatrical. It's not just cold. It's the kind of weather that seems designed to humiliate you. Every breath feels like inhaling broken glass. Every step a negotiation between slipping, sinking, or snapping your ankle. You wake with frost on your eyebrows, your breath hanging in the air like smoke from a dying fire, and your chest feels as if it's been scrubbed with wire. The laudanum is tempting, always is, but you ignore it. You need your head clear today. You need to make choices, because the truth is, you've run out of options. No food left, no candle wax, no coal, no matches, nothing but a few coppers and the dull ache of lungs that won't stop muttering threats with every breath. You sit on the edge of your bed, rubbing your hands together hard, trying to start a fire with friction and willpower alone. The frost on the inside of the window has grown thicker. You can't see the street anymore, just abstract swirls of white on the glass, as if winter itself is trying to draw you a final warning. You stand, dress in the same stiff coat and boots you've worn for weeks, and stuff your remaining coins into your pocket. You need heat. Not want, need. You'll trade anything for it. Dignity, pride, even your last bit of self-respect. London has a currency for everything, and in winter, warmth is the highest denomination. You pass the girl's door on the way out. Still no sound, still no light. You knock once, gently. No answer. You knock again, louder. Nothing. For a moment you consider breaking in. But then what? What would you do if you found her like, well, you step away, one mercy at a time. Out on the street the cold hits harder than before. You're not even sure how that's possible, but it is. The wind is no longer wind, it's a slap. The fog is back too, denser than ever. Your scarf is stiff with frozen spit within minutes. Your fingertips go numb, then burn, then numb again. You try wiggling them. Nothing. You head towards Spitalfields Market, though you don't expect much. Everything's been frozen or picked clean. Still, Sometimes the traders will give scraps to the desperate, burned crusts, bruised apples, cracked eggs. You arrive to find most of the stalls shuttered. The few that remain are manned by silent vendors, wrapped in so many layers they look like ambulatory blankets. You try the baker first, a woman with sallow skin and soot-stained fingers. She doesn't speak, just eyes your empty hands. You offer a coin. She shakes her head. Not enough. Next is the coal cart. A man with a face like cracked leather, his hands black to the wrists. You hand him your remaining coins. That'll get you half a sack, he grunts. If you can carry it. You nod. You'll carry it. You'd carry a dead horse if it got you through the night. He shovels the dusty remnants into a burlap sack. Slack, mostly. Fine as ash. The stuff no one wants. Not real coal, but coal adjacent. It'll burn for an hour if you're lucky. 2 if you ration it like a miser in hell. You haul it over your shoulder and begin the walk home, legs buckling under the weight, breath wheezing like a broken bellows. The fog is worse now. You can't see more than a few feet in any direction. Everything is soft, quiet, and wrong. You pass figures that look like statues, or maybe they are statues. One man is frozen in place, leaning against a lamppost. You slow as you pass. He doesn't move. You can't tell if he's alive. You don't ask. You reach your street and pause again at the girl's door. Still nothing. You curse under your breath and set the coal down. Then you go back. Knock harder. Still no answer. Your heart stutters. You press your ear to the wood. Silence. You force the door open. It creaks. Inside, the room is still. No fire, no candle. Just shadow and frost. She's on the bed, barely more than a shape under a coat. You rush over. Her face is pale, lips cracked, eyes open but unfocused. She blinks once, then again, still alive, barely. You don't think. You run upstairs, grab your sack of coal and drag it down, spilling half the slack in the hallway. You dump what you can into her fireplace, strike a match, one of the precious few you had stashed away in a tin, and pray it catches. The fire sputters, resists, then flares. Weakly, but it's fire. She hasn't spoken, but she's breathing. You find an old rag in her cupboard, soak it in melted snow from a pot by the door and press it to her lips. She drinks, eyes fluttering. "Thank you," she whispers, barely audible. That's enough. You sit beside the fireplace, shoulders hunched, watching the flame. It spits black smoke and smells like scorched oil, but it's warm. Slowly the air changes. Slowly the frost starts to melt from the inside of the window. And here's what no one writes down: the economics of warmth. Not just firewood or coal or coin, but the moral math you're forced to do. What would you give for heat? For a bed that doesn't bite? For one night where your breath doesn't come in short, shivering gasps? In Victorian London, warmth is never free. It costs something. Always. For you, it cost your last penny and the feeling in your hands. For her, it nearly cost her life. The fire crackles louder. She shifts beneath the coat. You glance at her. "I'll stay a while," you say. She nods. Outside, the wind rattles the windows, but inside, you've stolen something back from the city. A small corner of heat. A brief pause in the freeze. Just enough. You stay until the fire dies, until the slack turns to ash and the room fills with that faint metallic smell of burned sulphur. The girl has fallen asleep, breathing slow and uneven under her coat. You watch her chest rise and fall, counting each breath as if by watching you can keep them coming. When the last ember fades, you pull your scarf over her shoulders and slip out quietly, leaving the door ajar so she won't wake to darkness. The street outside is a battlefield of snow and silence. The storm has stopped, but what it left behind looks like a siege. Drifts piled waist-high against doorways, icicles like spears hanging from eaves. Your boots crunch loudly in the stillness, breaking the crust of frozen slush. Every sound carries far, echoing off the brick walls. You're tired, but you're restless too. The city feels wound up tonight, like a spring about to snap. You head west, following the glow of gas lamps. They're brighter here, their light refracting through frost into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Children are out, throwing snowballs at one another, first laughing, then shouting. One boy packs his snowball so hard it turns to ice. He hurls it at another's head. It hits with a dull thud. The second boy stumbles, clutching his temple. An older man intervenes, swatting at them with a walking stick. "Enough of that," he barks, though he's laughing too. Snowball fights in London aren't like the playful skirmishes in countryside stories. Here they're half game, half violence. During the harshest winters, gangs of boys use snowballs filled with stones to start fights with rivals or with constables. Whole streets turned into icy war zones. Newspapers called them snow riots. One such brawl in 1855 left 3 dead and 20 injured, thrown into the Thames or trampled by horses. Winter brings out the worst in everyone, even children. You cut down an alley where 2 men are wrestling, slipping in the snow. It's hard to tell if it's a fight or a game. One has the other by the collar, shaking him like a rug. A small crowd stands back, watching. You don't. You keep moving. You've learned there's nothing you can do but become another casualty. You emerge onto Bishopsgate just as a group of workers rounds the corner, singing a ragged tune. Their voices are rough, but they're harmonising, stamping their boots to keep warm. It's a pub song, about a sailor and a barmaid and a wager gone wrong. They're drunk clearly, but also jubilant. It's a kind of defiance, the sound of people refusing to let the cold choke them silent. The mood infects you. You find yourself humming as you walk, the tune sticking like soot to your ribs. It feels good, in a strange way, to make noise in a city that's been muted by frost and hunger. Ahead, near Liverpool Street, you see a gathering. Not a market, too late for that, but a crowd huddled under a broken archway. You approach cautiously. At the centre, a man stands on a crate, waving his arms. He's wearing a thick coat patched with different fabrics, like a quilt made of desperation. His voice rises and falls over the crowd. You catch fragments of it, not charity, but justice. We freeze while they feast, coal for the rich, crumbs for the rest. It's a speech, a call to action, a cold weather uprising. The man's eyes burn as he shouts, and the people respond with murmurs, nods, some clapping. The wind carries his words up into the night, twisting them between the gas lamps. We shovel their snow, he cries. We clear their tracks. We sweep their chimneys, and still our children die in the streets. You stand at the edge, not clapping, not jeering, just listening. You've heard speeches before, on corners, in pubs, at the docks. Most fade away like your breath in the cold. But something about this one feels different. The crowd isn't just curious, they're angry. The kind of anger that can tip into action if given a nudge. Here's a fringe fact. London had winter riots long before the famous strikes. Bread riots, fuel riots, even mutton marches, where starving families paraded stolen carcasses down Fleet Street. The city's cold makes people combustible. All it takes is a spark. A constable appears at the far end of the street, baton in hand, eyes scanning the crowd. Another follows. The man on the crate lowers his voice, but his fists clench tighter. The people glance around, shifting uneasily. No one wants a fight. Not tonight. Not with snow underfoot and batons in gloved hands. You slip away before the tension breaks. You've got no interest in being trampled or arrested. You head back toward your neighbourhood, the echo of the speech still in your ears. Not charity, but justice. The walk home feels longer than usual. Your legs are heavy, your lungs ache, and your fingers have gone past burning to a deep, eerie numbness. But there's something else inside you too. A pulse of heat that isn't physical. A kind of shared anger. A question that won't leave. Why must warmth be a privilege? Why is winter a death sentence only for some? You reach your building and pause outside the girl's door. This time you hear movement. A cough. Good. She's alive. You climb your own stairs, hands trembling as you fumble for a match. The candle flares, casting shadows on the wall. You sit on the bed, the echo of the crowd still in your chest. You imagine snowball fights turning to riots, songs turning to slogans, cold turning to heat. Not from fires, but from people finally refusing to freeze quietly. For a moment you let yourself picture it. A city thawing not because of spring, but because its people won't accept winter anymore. Then you laugh once, bitterly. You're too tired for dreams, you blow out the candle. The dark folds around you like a second blanket. You're back at the frost fair the next day. Not because you believe in it, but because you don't know where else to go. The streets have offered nothing but frostbitten fingers and bad news, and your room feels more like a tomb than a home. The girl downstairs is still breathing, but barely. You left her half a crust and the last stub of a candle, lit it with one of your final matches, and slipped out while she slept. You told yourself you'd find something, food, wood, luck, anything, but instead your boots brought you here, back to the frozen Thames, and it's different this time. Not dead exactly, but not alive either. The fair is thinning. What was once chaotic and bright has turned grey and eerie, like the after-party of a ghost wedding. Booths stand half collapsed, their signs blowing in the wind. A fortune-teller's tent has been gutted, fabric flapping like loose skin. A printing press sits abandoned in the middle of the ice, half buried in snow, its ink frozen in the tray. The crowd is mostly gone. Only a few wanderers now, drunks, strays, and you. You pass a man lying face down near a toffee cart. No one checks him. No one dares. He's not moving. That's all anyone needs to know. The ice groans beneath your feet as you walk. Not metaphorically, literally. A long, low moan that echoes across the river like a warning shot. You stop. Wait. No cracks appear. But it doesn't matter. The Thames has moods, and right now she's growing tired of being walked on. You find the edge of the fair, where a few stalls still operate. A woman is selling weak broth from a tin pot over a coal fire that smells like boiled socks. You hand her the last coin in your pocket without even asking the price. She ladles it into a tin cup and hands it over. It's thin, salty, lukewarm. But it's warm. You drink it all in 4 gulps and almost weep when it hits your stomach. She watches you. First meal today? You nod. She says nothing more, just stirs the pot with a ladle carved from bone. You walk away before you start begging. There's music somewhere. Not real music, just someone playing a cracked fiddle off key. It drifts across the ice like a lullaby being murdered. You follow the sound, not sure why. Maybe because it's something to follow. Maybe because it's anything. You find him near a fire made of shipping crate splinters. The fiddler is ancient, cheeks hollow, eyes sunken, beard like frost-bitten weeds. His fingers are blue but still moving, coaxing noise from the instrument with the stubbornness of a man who refuses to die until the last song is done. A few people gather round listening, not clapping, just listening. Some have hands tucked under armpits. One woman rocks a bundle that may or may not be a baby. No one smiles, but they stay. You sit too. You let the music crawl into your ears and numb the parts of you the cold hasn't reached yet. For a moment the world stops. Then the ice moans again. Louder. People start murmuring. A few stand. One man gestures toward the centre of the river where the fog is denser. Something's moving, slow, heavy. You squint. It's a carriage, a full black carriage moving across the ice, but there's no driver. Just the horses. 2 of them. Massive, black as coal, their eyes glowing faintly red. The carriage sways with each step, wheels creaking against the uneven frost. It makes no sense. The ice can't support that weight. Not out there, not near the centre. The fiddler stops playing, everyone is silent, you hold your breath. The carriage comes closer but not toward the fair. It moves parallel, silent except for the sound of hooves on snow. You glance at the others. No one speaks. Some turn away, some cross themselves. The carriage vanishes into the fog. You exhale. Here's a fringe fact they don't teach in schools. In old London folklore there were always whispers of the black carriage. A funeral coach that appeared only during winters so cruel. Even death felt cold. They said it came for souls that hadn't yet been claimed. Those who died quietly without notice, without prayer. Bodies never found, names never spoken. The carriage found them, took them away. It's a myth, of course. But right now you're not so sure. You stand and back away from the centre of the river. Others do the same. The music doesn't resume. The fiddler has stopped, staring down at his bow like it's betrayed him. You walk, slowly, toward the north bank. Every step feels like it might be your last. The ice creaks and groans underfoot, and you hear it, faintly beneath the surface. Running water, still moving, still alive, still waiting to rise. At the shore you climb the embankment with numb fingers and boots soaked through. You look back once. The fair is dissolving. The wind is rising. And this is the part the scholars still debate. Why did the frost fairs stop? Some blame modern bridges and the faster current. Others say the climate warmed, the Thames too deep to freeze again. But a few suggest something more poetic. That the city changed. That London grew too fast, too big, too full of ghosts. That the river decided it had been walked on long enough. You believe that version. You trudge home through streets where the snow has turned to slush. The fog follows you like a stray. Somewhere nearby, a child cries once, then stops. Back in your room, you check on the girl. Still breathing. Good. You light your final match and sit by the stub of candle, watching the flame fight for space in the cold. and you whisper, without meaning to, "Don't come for me yet. Not tonight." You sleep in your boots that night, scarf still wrapped around your neck, one hand resting on the laudanum bottle like it's a weapon. The fire's long dead, the candle's gone, and the dark wraps around you in layers, thicker than any blanket. You wake several times, not from noise, but from nothing. That eerie kind of alertness that comes when the silence changes texture, like the air shifts in its sleep and pulls you with it. Just before dawn, you sit up and feel it in your chest, a tightness deeper than the usual ache. Not pain exactly, but pressure, as if something is leaning on your ribs, reminding you how close you're getting to the edge. You cough, a long rattling thing, and when you check your sleeve, the blood is darker this time. Not a streak, a smear, thick. You spit into a cloth and decide not to look again. What's the point? It's not like you can afford a doctor. Even if you could, what would they do? Cut you open and drain you like a goose? Does you with mercury and prayers? You've seen how it goes. No thanks. You check on the girl. Her door's ajar, just a crack. You peek inside. She's asleep, curled up like a letter folded in on itself. Her breath comes in slow whistles. Her cheeks are flushed, not from warmth, but from fever. Still, she's alive. For now, that's enough. You head out into a city that looks like it's been buried alive. Snowbanks lean against buildings like tired soldiers. The sky is that chalky white that makes it impossible to tell what time it is. A soft powder falls from above, not fresh snow, more like ash. Grey, dusty, slow. It lands on your shoulders and clings to your coat like you've been dipped in memory. The streets are half abandoned. The ones still out here look like ghosts wrapped in rags, heads low, feet dragging. No one talks. What would they say? Still breathing? Not dead yet? Even those start to sound like bragging after a while. You pass a child trying to sell kindling, 3 sticks tied with a bit of twine. "Penny a bundle," she whispers, her voice like cracked glass. Her eyes are sunken, but her posture is proud. She doesn't beg, just holds the wood out like it's worth its weight in gold, and maybe it is. You give her nothing. Not because you don't want to, but because you can't. You nod once, and she nods back, like 2 soldiers acknowledging each other on opposite sides of the trench. You follow the road toward Clerkenwell, where the soup kitchen lines have doubled overnight. People stand in place for hours, just for a ladle of broth that's more water than food. Some hold children, some hold tin cups. One man holds a shovel like it's his last possession. A priest in a wool coat stands near the entrance, handing out something that might be bread. His gloves are fingerless. You wonder if he cut them himself, or just wore through them with kindness. He speaks to everyone who passes, even the ones who pretend not to hear. He sees you, nods once, then returns to the woman in front of him, pressing her hand in both of his like warmth could be transferred through force of will. There's an argument near the front. A man accuses another of cutting the line. Voices rise, a shove, a punch. The priest moves quickly, stepping between them, hands raised, words calm. "Not here," he says, voice firm. "Not today." Eventually the tension bleeds out. The line resumes. You don't join it. You just keep walking. London's poorer districts during the worst winters weren't just cold, they were collapsing. Water pumps froze, sewers backed up. Rats moved indoors, bold and starving. Entire tenements went dark. You heard stories about people burning furniture, books, clothes, even corpses just to stay warm. No one admitted it, but everyone suspected it. If you saw a fire that burned too hot, too long, too quiet, you didn't ask what fueled it. You reach a part of the city you haven't seen in weeks. Near the old canal, where the warehouses sit like sleeping beasts. There's smoke here, not from fires, but from factories still running. You can smell iron and grease in the air, and you realise how long it's been since you smelled work. You approach a dock where men are unloading sacks from a barge. They move like machines, slow, tired, mechanical. You ask if they need help. One man looks you over, then laughs. You'd lost half a sack before you drop. You nod. He's not wrong, but you ask again. 3 pence for the morning, he says. Half if you quit. You take it. What choice do you have? The work is brutal. The sacks are soaked with river water, filled with flour or gravel. You can't tell. Your fingers go numb fast. Your back seizes before the hour's out. Your cough worsens. But you keep lifting, keep moving, because the pain means you're still here. The cold eats away at the edges of your vision, but you ignore it. At the end of it, the foreman hands you 2 coppers and a slice of bread so stale you could use it as a weapon. You thank him anyway. He doesn't respond. You eat the bread sitting on a crate staring at the ice drifting down the canal. The water here hasn't frozen solid. It flows slow and dark, patches of slush swirling like thoughts you don't want to finish. You think about the girl, her shallow breaths. You think about the child selling kindling. You think about the man with the shovel. And for a second, you feel something rise in you. Fury, maybe. Or grief. You can't tell them apart anymore. Here's the historical question that always gets asked in the warm halls of universities. How did they survive it? These winters, this poverty, this endless biting cold. The answer is this. They didn't. Not all of them. Many didn't survive. Many disappeared into the fog, into the ice, into the pages of burial ledgers. Those who did survive, they didn't endure so much as mutate, harden hollow out. You walk home through streets that no longer look like London, but like some broken version of it. A city sculpted from soot and frost. When you reach your door, the knob is cold enough to burn. You open it slowly, expecting silence, but you hear something, movement, a cough. The girl's awake. You sit by her fire, still warm from the ashes you left, and hand her half the bread. She takes it without speaking, just nods. A thank you deeper than words. You share the other half. And for a moment you both sit there like royalty, chewing slowly, savouring each crumb. Because tonight there is fire and food and breath, and that is more than most. The thaw doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It comes like a drunk trying to sneak in without waking anyone. One morning, the icicles on your window are just a little shorter. The next, the air smells faintly of mud instead of coal dust. It's subtle, fragile, the kind of change you wouldn't notice unless your whole life was built around watching for it. But you notice. Because when you've lived inside the cold long enough, even the tiniest warmth feels suspicious. You wake to the sound of dripping. At first, you think it's something leaking, your roof, your lungs, maybe even your sanity. But no, it's real. The frost on the edge of the window has started to melt. Tiny rivulets trickle down the pane, carving crooked lines through the dust. You reach out and touch the glass, still cold, but not biting. Your breath fogs it just a little less than yesterday. The girl downstairs knocks on your door before you can knock on hers. She's still pale, still coughing, but standing, wrapped in a borrowed blanket like a makeshift cloak. "It's melting," she says, her voice rough. "You feel it?" You nod. "I heard it." She grins, the first real smile you've seen on her face, and it changes everything. Suddenly she looks young again, not like some frostbitten ghost, but like a person, a survivor. And something in your chest stirs, something you thought the cold had killed for good. Hope. You both go out just to see. The city looks as if someone's tried to clean it but gave up halfway through. Slush replaces snow. Gutters are clogged with wet ash and broken ice. Smoke clings lower to the ground. The air is still miserable but slightly less deadly. London isn't welcoming you back. It's just easing up like a debt collector who's decided to break one less finger today. You walk past a group of children splashing in a puddle the size of a grave. One of them is barefoot. You look at the girl. She shrugs. "Told you," she says. "It's changing." At the market, stalls reappear like mushrooms after rain. Damp potatoes, thawed cabbage, grey bread. Nothing fresh, but food all the same. You trade one of your few remaining coppers for a turnip that tastes like dirt and salvation. The girl gnaws on it like it's roast goose. Neither of you complain. It's not a celebration exactly. No one's singing, no one's dancing. But there's a softness returning to people's movements. A slowing of the hunched shoulders. A few more nods between strangers. The air has started letting go. You stop by the river, what's left of the frost fair now. Just wet boards floating near the shore, scraps of fabric tangled in driftwood. The ice has cracked and split. Wide dark channels cutting through the white. Someone's lost a cart out there, its wheels sticking up like a dying beetle. A child's mitten floats by. It's peaceful in the worst way, like visiting the scene of a miracle after the priest's gone home and the candles have burned out. Here's your historical footnote for the day. The last true frost fair was in 1814. It ended with a sudden thaw, and the ice broke apart so violently that entire stalls collapsed into the river. People barely escaped with their lives. One man, a printer, was reportedly swallowed whole by the Thames while trying to salvage his press. After that, the river never froze solid again. Some say it was due to the new bridges and deeper embankments. Others say London had grown too hot with grief and soot to freeze over anymore. Fringe fact? In the wake of that final frost fair, people took pieces of the ice home with them, as souvenirs. They carved it with initials and poems, stored it in cellars, said it brought luck. Of course, it didn't last. It never does. You and the girl sit on a bench overlooking the river. It's damp, but your coats are thicker now. Or maybe you're just too tired to care. She points at the ice and says, "Think it'll come back?" You shake your head. "No, that was the last one." She looks down. "Good." That catches you off guard. "You didn't like it?" She shrugs. "Like the warmth. Like the people. But not the idea of it. Ice isn't a place to live. It's a place to wait. That's all we've been doing. Waiting to fall through." You don't respond. Because she's right. You watch a gull circle overhead, its wings slicing through the mist. It lets out a long, lazy call like even it's too tired for drama. The girl leans back and closes her eyes. Her cheeks have colour now. Not from fever, from sun. A weak, watery sun trying its best behind the clouds. But it's something. The rest of the walk home feels different. Lighter. Like the streets have widened. Like London is taking in air for the first time in weeks. You pass the child selling kindling again. Her stack is smaller today. "Sold a few," she says proudly. You hand her the last stub of your broken comb carved from horn. She eyes it like it's treasure. Back in your building, the girl's room smells less like sickness and more like old fabric and cooled ash. You fix the window latch with a nail you found by the river. She wraps her hands around a mug of hot water, no tea, just heat, and sits quietly. You sit across from her. No words, no noise, just steam rising. The kind that doesn't vanish too quickly. And this is what the historians never write about. The first moment the cold starts to leave. They write about the blizzards, the deaths, the crisis. But not the moment the air changes. Not the moment people begin to breathe without flinching. Not the quiet victories. Not this. This is the moment the city exhales. This is the moment you start to believe in after. You wake to the sound of pigeons. Not the usual gutter-clinging, frost-coated kind, but the active kind. Wings flapping, feathers rustling, beaks tapping at your window, like they've just remembered how to live. And you just lie there for a minute letting the sound sink in. It's not pleasant exactly. Pigeons are filthy little creatures, but it's different. Not a cough, not a creak, not a death cart. Just birds, doing bird things, as if the world might still work after all. Your body aches in familiar ways, but the pain is duller now. You still cough when you move too fast. Your breath still wheezes like an old accordion, but there's no blood this morning. You check your sleeve just to be sure, still clean. That, more than the birds, is the first true sign. Something's shifting inside you. You throw on your coat, which smells like coal dust and old soup, and step outside. The street is still damp and filthy, but the colour's coming back. The snow's mostly gone now, just patches of grey ice clinging to the edges of the cobbles like last guests at a bad party. The air is soft, not warm exactly, but yielding, as though it's no longer trying to prove a point. You nod to a neighbour you've never spoken to before. They nod back. That's new. Maybe the winter has made everyone a little less invisible. Or maybe you're just finally noticing faces again. Down the block, someone's scrubbing a doorstep with a stiff-bristled brush. The soapy water runs into the gutter, turning the slush a sad shade of lavender. A child's drawing in chalk is smeared across the pavement, a sun with too many rays and a house with no chimney. You step around it, carefully. You swing by the girl's room and she's already up, sipping thin tea and sitting cross-legged on the floor like she's never been sick. There's light in her eyes now, the kind that says maybe she's planning to stick around. You don't stay long, she nods. You nod. Everything doesn't need a conversation. Sometimes survival is its own dialogue. You wander through the city not looking for anything, just walking. For the first time in weeks, your hands don't hurt inside your gloves. You can flex your fingers without cursing. You can feel your toes again, which is a mixed blessing considering the state of your boots. The air smells odd. Still smoky, still damp but layered with something else. Soil, cabbage, sweat. Life. Near the park you pass a group of washerwomen pinning clothes to a line. The linens flap gently. like surrender flags from a house that no longer wants to fight the cold. A man chops wood in the alley behind a pub, his shirt sleeves rolled up like it's spring already. A dog darts through the street with a heel of bread in its mouth, chased by 3 children laughing so hard they nearly fall over. And in that moment, for the first time in longer than you can remember, you laugh too. Just once. Just a short, surprised sound. But it escapes your mouth before you can stop it. And it feels so foreign, so strange, that you pause and check yourself. Did that really just happen? You cross the road near a lamplighter. A boy no older than 13 with a long pole and a smudge of soot across his cheek. He's extinguishing the gas lamps now, one by one. A sign of mourning. A ritual of return. You watch him lift the pole with practiced ease and snuff out the last flickering flame. The street darkens for a moment, then brightens with natural light. Weak, golden, honest. There's a coffee stall nearby, run by a man with hands like tree roots. He sells you a cup of what might be actual coffee, or just barley and optimism. It's hot, and that's all you need. He nods toward a pile of paper-wrapped biscuits. Day-olds. 2 for a halfpenny. You nod back, hand him a coin, and take 3. You eat the biscuits on the steps of a church that looks more like a ruin than a place of worship. Still, someone's cleared the snow from its steps. A tiny act of reverence. Pigeons strut nearby, eyeing your food like they helped you earn it. You toss them a crumb. Just one. Here's your historical moment for the day. In post-winter London, the economy of the city shifted rapidly. Workers returned to the factories, children to the schools, and markets bloomed overnight with goods that had vanished during the freeze. But it wasn't always smooth. There were outbreaks of illness, typhus, influenza, low fever. Bodies weakened by weeks of cold sometimes collapsed under the strain of warmth. No one prepared you for that. Fringe fact. There was a belief among chimney sweeps that the first warm day after a cruel winter could steal your soul if you stood still for too long. They'd whistle as they worked, not for cheer, but to keep the spirit moving. You hum softly now, not to test the theory, but because silence feels heavier than it used to. You make your way down a narrow alley where the snow has melted into thick puddles. A woman kneels near a cart scooping water into a bucket. Not ice. Water. Actual liquid water. That's all it takes to make your throat tighten. You crouch beside her and dip your fingers in. It's cold, but not cruel. You wash your face in it. You don't even care who's watching. You hear bells later. Not funeral bells. Not church bells. Just a handcart being rung as it rolls down the street. A man selling apples. Small, spotted, bruised, but real. You can't afford them. Doesn't matter. The sound of the bell is proof enough that the world is turning again. You return home in the golden dim of late afternoon. The girl is at your door holding 2 cracked teacups, one for you. You take it and sit on the step beside her, sipping in silence. The drink is weak. Just hot water with a hint of something herbal. Mint, maybe. Or thyme. You don't ask. You sit there until the sun slips behind the rooftops. Neither of you speaks, because what's there to say? You survived. Not well. Not cleanly. Not comfortably. But you did. And now the ice is melting. Not just in the gutters and on the river, but inside your chest. That place where everything had frozen shut. You're not sure when it happens exactly, but one morning you open the window and it smells like earth. Not coal, not ash, not decay, but dirt. Honest, damp, living dirt. The kind you forgot even had a scent. The street outside is still filthy. London doesn't turn into a postcard just because the ice lets go. But there's a different kind of mess now. Mud instead of frost. Puddles instead of drifts. Life instead of silence. You lean out and rest your elbows on the windowsill. Below, someone's banging a rug against a lamppost, thick clouds of dust puffing into the air. A dog lopes past with a stick in its mouth, tail up like a flag. And there's music again. Not a funeral dirge, not a fiddler on his last breath, but a hurdy-gurdy somewhere in the distance, playing a tune that sounds suspiciously hopeful. Your body still hurts. That's not gone. You move slowly, joints stiff like someone twice your age, but your cough's less frequent. You've even slept through the night once or twice. The girl downstairs has been leaving her door open, and the scent of broth sometimes wafts up to your landing. Where she got broth you don't ask, but you recognise the smell of charity when it's finally cooked into something edible. You head out, boots squelching in the street, and the sun, yes, actual sun, bounces off the puddles like it's got something to prove. You walk to the market not because you need anything, but because it's open. Full, even. Stalls line the walkways, offering everything from bruised fruit to wilted greens to suspicious eels. You pass one that's selling blankets, real ones, not patchwork rags stitched from shame. You run your hand across the wool, just once, and for a moment you wonder what it'd be like to sleep wrapped in something that wasn't woven from cold and regret. You don't buy it, of course. You've got 2 coppers and a half bit of credit with the baker near the church. You get bread instead. Actual bread. Still warm in the middle. You tear it in half and eat while walking, no shame in it. You've chewed your meals in alleys and on stairs, on crates and behind barrels, and now, finally, you're doing it in the open, under sunlight. That's a kind of wealth the city never taxes. You reach Covent Garden, where a preacher is shouting about the wages of sin and the gift of deliverance. His voice is raw, already cracking, but the crowd's not really listening. They're watching a juggler instead. 3 flaming pins tossed into the air with reckless joy. Laughter breaks out when one hits the ground and rolls toward a fishmonger. He curses, throws it back, and the juggler catches it one-handed. Cheers follow. And for the first time in weeks, it sounds like the city is alive. You wander past the spot where the frost fair once sprawled. The river's back to itself, muddy, restless, dragging bits of broken wood along its current like a dog with bad memories. There's no sign of the fair anymore. No stalls, no tents, no ghosts. Just a wide, wet, moving ribbon of brown, like the city's scar healing over. You pause on the bridge and watch a gull dive for something in the water. It misses, circles, tries again. You wonder what it's like to be a creature that never stops moving. No address, no debts, no winter to reckon with. Just feathers, sky, and the certainty that somewhere there's something to eat. You envy that. Here's the historical truth they never quite tell you. After winters like these, people didn't go back to normal. There was no snapping back, no reset. You carried it with you, in your hands, in your breath, in the way you looked at doorways, always checking for frost on the hinges. The city might thaw, but you stayed half frozen inside. That was the real legacy of the winter, what it taught you to expect. The girl meets you near the bakery. She's got a bandage on her wrist and a slightly smug look on her face. "Burned myself," she says. "Cooking." You raise your brows. She shrugs. "Told you I'd figure it out." You offer her the second half of your bread. She breaks it in 2, insists on giving the smaller piece back to you. You don't argue. You just eat side by side, watching the people rush by as if the frost had never happened. Fringe fact for the day. There was once a theory that London's poorest adapted to cold better than the wealthy, because they never stopped moving. Rest was a luxury. Idleness, death. You can't freeze if you're too busy surviving. Not scientific, but strangely accurate. You know because you lived it. You and the girl walk in silence until you reach an old iron fence. A single violet's blooming near the base, half crushed by a footprint but still standing. She kneels to look at it, and then just laughs, a light startled sound. "That shouldn't be here," she says. "Not yet." You both stare at it like it might disappear, but it doesn't. Later that evening you light your candle, new, bought from a man near the docks who was selling them cheap from a broken crate, and you watch the flame with reverence. Not fear, not desperation, just quiet thanks. The room is still cold, yes, but not hostile. You wrap yourself in your blanket and lie back, the sounds of the city trickling in through the cracked window, distant laughter, a cart rolling over cobbles, a bell somewhere far off, and in that final moment before sleep you think of all the things you never got to bury. The fair, the lost, the parts of you that cracked and didn't quite heal right. But you don't grieve them. Not tonight, because tonight is for survivors, and you are one of them. So now you're here, lying back with your eyes half closed, the candle flickering soft shadows across the walls. London's out there still, rumbling and breathing and muttering to itself like it always does, but the frost is gone. Not completely, never completely, but enough. Enough to let the streets fill up again with footsteps instead of footprints. Enough to let the birds return to the chimneys and the stalls to spill cabbage and leeks back onto the cobbles. Enough that when you wake up tomorrow the first thing you feel might not be pain. And sure, you still cough. The cold took a toll, no doubt about it. Your body won't let you forget. The girl downstairs. She's still limping through her recovery, sometimes walking with a tilt like she's leaning into a wind that isn't there. But she sings now, off-key, low, and only when she thinks no one's listening. But you hear it, and you don't tell her to stop. You start seeing old faces return, men who'd vanished into shelters or alleys, women who'd barricaded themselves in back rooms to escape the frost. Now they're back in the queues, back in the parks, back at the corners where news travels faster than sense. The city's warming not just in temperature but in tone. Laughter sounds a little less strained. Footsteps fall with more confidence. The collective shoulders of London relax by a single precious inch. That's the thing about surviving a Victorian winter. It's not about winning. You don't conquer it. You just endure it until the ice recedes and the thaw gives you permission to move again. You don't leave unchanged. No one does. The cold gets in. Not just under your skin, but into your thoughts, into your habits. You flinch at breezes. You count matches. You memorize the signs of a failing lung, a frostbite on the tips of fingers. But you do survive. And maybe that's all history really is. People making it through things that should have killed them. You curl deeper into your blanket. The sounds outside fade, but the warmth in the room holds. Not much, just enough. Enough to keep the cold at the edge of your thoughts. Enough to let you exhale without seeing your breath. Somewhere far off, a bell chimes once, and it doesn't sound like a warning. It sounds like a lullaby. So now, as the light fades and your body begins to settle, let this be the part where you let go. Not of everything, just enough to rest. You've seen London's frostbite up close. You've walked its frozen rivers and shared its last crusts. You've watched the death carts roll by and ignored the sounds behind closed doors. You've lit fires from scraps and warmed your hands over coals that burned too fast. But you made it. That alone is worth remembering. So tonight, sleep like someone who's earned it. The worst of the cold has passed. The thaw's here. And though London will never truly soften, you've found your way through it, one cracked step at a time.